Chapter 712, Pummeled. Chapter 712, Pummeled. Reverie _Henyi. The two powerful hatchet men were actually entangled. Yu Xianying's expression was obviously somewhat pale, but he still wasn't alarmed, because Yu family's backing made him full of confidence. One family with 3 heaven-tier elites other than the 5 great sects, how many other forces could compare with it? Therefore, he was obviously calm and collected, believing that no matter how daring Ling Han was, he wouldn't dare attack him. The 7th patriarch came here personally, but he was young and aggressive, wanting to venture alone, so he separated from the 7th patriarch. Daring to attack him? You didn't want your life anymore? What upset him was that if these people couldn't be taken down, the treasured pearl and the fairy would have nothing to do with him. Yu Xianying said coldly, "Oh, what kind of person do you dislike?" "I'll listen for the time being." Ling Han said, "I dislike people who make me dislike them." This was a little roundabout, and to say it was to say nothing. Yu Xianying snorted, and said, "You're provoking me." "Provoking you?" Ling Han laughed, and said, "You have too much respect for yourself. Who are you to deserve my provocation? I've got nothing to do, so might as well start with you." T. "So you're provoking me?" Yu Xianying said coldly, "Might as well tell you, my family's 7th patriarch also entered the mystery realm, so if you don't want to die, hand over the treasured pearl immediately and leave this woman. And, slap yourself 30 times and leave an arm." The more he looked at Ling Han, the more annoyed he became, because this guy put an arm around Yu Xianying's slender waist, making him burn with envy. How domineering. Ling Han looked towards Li Fengyu with a smile, and said, "Brother Li, how about I leave this guy for you to pummel?" "Sure, I'll definitely beat the crap out of him." Li Fengyu nodded. The corner of Zhu Xian'er's and Li Zixian's mouths twitched, almost retching. "Brother, can you not be so disgusting?" Li Zixian said. They had been brazenly freeloading by Ling Han's side. If he made people feel revolted, what would they do if they weren't brought along to play? Li Fengyu laughed mischievously and took large strides towards Yu Xianying. He said, "Damned brat, you even dare to have ideas about my sister. If I don't beat you till you can't take care of yourself, I'll assume your surname. Who had ideas about your sister? Don't you speak recklessly. You court death." Yu Xianying was obviously fearless. Both were in the flower blossom tier, and he was a genius. What was a genius? Someone invincible in the same tier. He unleashed a long sword, which was a 6th-tier spirit toolit was consistent with his tier, and he could unleash 90% of its power. In case of a spirit tool not nourished by oneself, with different martial intent, it would be impossible to unleash 100% of its power in the end. Li Fengyu laughed, and waved his hand as he said, "You're no match for me." "Why?" Yu Xianying said in a low voice. His killing intent overflowingly big mouth's cheap mouth art was so amazing that Li Fengyu had already successfully replaced Ling Han as the person that Yu Xianying wanted to kill. "Because I've got a saber and a sword. Having one more saber than you, how could you possibly compare to me?" Li Fengyu said proudly, shaking his hands, and a sword and a saber appeared as expected. This. Yu Xianying was almost angered to death. This guy was actually teasing him. He roared angrily and brandished his sword at Li Fengyu. Xiao, 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 9 flashes of sword chi flew freely, their power not at all weak. As expected, being able to become the descendant the family focused on to nurture, his martial arts talent was quite amazing. 9 flashes of sword chi already approached the level of Ray, and considering that he was only in the flower blossom tier, it was indeed worthy of praise. Li Fengyu wasn't weak, either. As he struck with the saber and the sword, 5 flashes of sword chi and 4 flashes of saber chi were unleashed. The number of flashes equaled Yu Xianying's. Hong. They exchanged one blow and retreated more than 10 steps. Their expressions became cautious. An expert. They both thought, and became extremely careful. In an expert's fight, one wrong move and the whole game could be lost. Obviously, no one dared to let their guard down. Ding, 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 they immediately started fighting again, their clash producing countless sparks. "You're very strong," Yu Xianying said. "But you're definitely no match for me." "You're not weak, either," Li Fengyu said. But you're definitely going to be beaten till you'll be searching for your teeth all over the ground. Ling Han sighed, and said, these two people really think themselves strong. Zhu Xian'er laughed faintly with her mouth covered, and said, they're standing on a mountain and can only see the peak in front, but they don't know that they'll see an even higher peak after conquering this one. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, Xian'er's becoming more and more philosophical. The battles were fierce on all three sides, but Ling Han yawned. Except for Hu Niu's battle, which was somewhat worth watching, the others were truly dull. Niu's rising dragon punch, Hu Niu shouted in a sweet voice. Her small body soared upwards and she punched Yang Chong's chin, also sending this old man into the sky. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood, along with 10 broken teeth. He lay on the ground with his eyes open, but only the whites of his eyes could be seen. Hu Niu had beaten his brain into mush with that punch, so he couldn't be any more dead than this. Aya, no more teeth, how will you eat meat in the future? Hu Niu tilted her head and thought for a while, then clapped her hands, and said, never mind, you're already dead anyway, no need to eat meat. Her wild nature had never faded, and she always had a murderous disposition. Once she attacked, it would naturally to kill. Old Yang! Zhu Bai cried out. Yang Chong, who was his equal, had actually died so easily in the hands of a little girl, making goosebumps rise all over his body and constricting even his heart. Su, Hu Niu's murderous disposition had been fully unleashed, and her eyes targeted Yu Xianying as she suddenly pounced on him. Blood spilled across the sky as Yu Xianying was instantly torn into many pieces, dying unintact. The little girl's gaze targeted Zhu Xian'er. She opened her mouth, the ominous glint in her eyes ablaze. Xiao, she charged over and reached out with her hands, her 10 fingers like tiger claws, emitting a chill. Ling Han hurriedly leapt backwards with Zhu Xian'er, and said, Hu Niu, stop, don't think I don't know you're faking it. No fun. Hu Niu immediately withdrew the ominous glint and reverted to her cute look, pursing her lips. Can't Hu Niu take the opportunity to kill her? Zhu Xian'er felt a lingering fear. She'd thought Hu Niu had gone berserk, but it was only faked to kill her while she was lost in a frenzy. Seemed like she really was quite a threat in Hu Niu's mind. The butcher's knife must never be swung at one's own people, got it? Ling Han said seriously. But, she's not one of our own, Hu Niu protested and played with her fingers. Niu's only with Ling Han. Ling Han was speechless. The little girl's exclusive mindset was really shocking as it had never changed at all over the years. Yuan Cheng he walked over and said apologetically, young Master Han, that old man ran away. Still, he was somewhat proud on the inside. 3 spiritual infant tier beings acted together to chase away a deity transformation tier elite. This was an amazing accomplishment, and would definitely be something to brag about. Chapter 713 Admittance. Chapter 713 Admittance. Reverie Henyi. Ran away. Ling Han looked into the distance, but Zhu Bai had already disappeared without a trace. Even if he and Hu Niu chased him now, it was basically impossible to catch up. Earlier, it was precisely because Hu Niu had caused a scene that Zhu Bai seized the opportunity. Otherwise, if Ling Han and Hu Niu had been watching out for him, at least a deity transformation tier warrior like him definitely wouldn't have been able to escape. Yu family indeed is a powerful heaven tier force, and under the 5 great sects, they can rank as a first-grade force, Wen Ren Chen said, looking somewhat worried. 3 heaven tier elites in one family, who dared to treat them lightly? Besides, Yu family's 7th ancestor also entered the historic site. If Zhu Bai were to tell the 7th ancestor about what happened here, then we're in big trouble, she continued. Ling Han was not afraid. He had the Black Tower, and at worst, he could temporarily hide from the trouble. With his progression speed, he could probably advance into the deity transformation tier at the end of the year, and killing normal heaven tier elites wouldn't be out of the question then. With Black Tower's power boost, he could even fight shattering void tier opponents. His gaze swept by everyone as he said, if heaven tier elites come, I do have a way to deal with them, but this involves my trump card. I'm thinking about whether I can trust you guys or not. Being glanced at one by one, everyone's hearts tensed up. Ling Han's gaze was filled with deterrent power, and his entire person emitted the aura of a king, making them subconsciously feel inferior. Ling Han paused, and said, "I'll show you guys a treasure, but the condition is that you guys must be of one mind and heart with me and never betray me. So, those who want to keep going stay, and the rest can leave." His words were obviously aimed at the Li siblings, Wenren Qian, Yuan Chenghe, and the rabbit. The Li siblings looked at each other and were the first to declare their position. They said, "We as brother and sister are willing to advance and retreat with young Master Han, riding on young Master Han's smoothly sailing ship." They didn't doubt in the least bit Ling Han's strength and potential. Yuan Chenghe also said, "I am young Master Han's follower to begin with." The rabbit chewed on a spirit medicine, and said, "You brats still owe Uncle Rabbit 2 dragons' blood overlord ginseng, so Uncle Rabbit obviously won't go." Only Wenren Qian was hesitant. She was also the genius of a region and had her own pride, rejecting Jioming who admired her without hesitation, so she obviously wouldn't easily make a promise. And seeing Ling Han's stance, which was clearly to take them as subordinates, it was something her sense of self-respect couldn't allow. She contemplated for a long while, then said, "Brother Ling, I'll be leaving for now." Ling Han nodded, smiling, and said, "We're friends, so if there's any troubles in the future, there's no harm in telling me. If it's accomplishable, I definitely won't decline." Wenren Qian was obviously overjoyed, and said quickly, "Then thank you, Brother Ling." She nodded at everyone and then leapt up, flying fast into the distance. Ling Han took a glance at everyone, and said, "I'll bring everyone to a place, don't resist my divine sense." Xiao, he brought everyone into the Black Tower. Tem. R.E.N. The 3 people and the rabbit all cried out in surprise. What was this place? It was definitely not the mystery realm earlier. Could it be that Ling Han could carry a small world with him? Ling Han smiled, and said, "This is my spatial spirit tool. It can accommodate living beings." The 3 people instantly revealed shocked expressions. A spatial spirit tool that could accommodate living beings was unheard of. The rabbit gasped in astonishment, and said, "Brat, this isn't a spirit tool, but a divine tool." "A divine tool?" Even Zhu Xian cried out in surprise. "Correct." The rabbit nodded. "My ancient ancestor ascended into the divine realm, but long ago, there were still some special methods to communicate with the lower realm, so Uncle Rabbit also knows some things about the divine realm. A space that can accommodate living things. Only gods have the mighty ability to extract and refine it into a microscopic space that can be carried on one's body, and that is only doable by the mighty even amongst the gods. You guys can see, the mystery realm we were in earlier is actually also a separate space that can accommodate living beings, but it can't be carried away and is fixed at a certain location instead, layering on top of the normal space. To compress a small world into a mustard seed one is too difficult, and the larger the space, the harder it is to do. Normal space would squeeze against it, and the larger it is, the easier it is for it to collapse. So, our spatial rings are all very small. Everyone nodded. Normally speaking, spatial rings were only the size of a box, and those reaching the size of a house were extremely rare. They knew that the larger the space of the spirit tool, the harder it was to make it, but hadn't known the reason why it was so hard, and only now they finally understood. So, a mystery realm was always in a fixed place, unlike spatial rings that could be carried around. With it fixed in place, it would be like building a house. The foundation could be laid in advance, and then the walls could be strengthened that way, it wouldn't collapse easily. Everyone looked at the terrifying space of the Black Tower and gasped in astonishment. This was completely comparable to the size of a mystery realm. Only Ling Han knew that Black Tower space was larger than any mystery realms he'd ever seen, even larger than all of them added together. "It's definitely the handiwork of a god," everyone cried out in shock. Ling Han smiled. They only knew that the Black Tower space was large, but they didn't know Black Tower's special abilities. For example, planting spirit medicine and producing the essence of the earth, the essence of water, and even that Black Tower unleashing its might could destroy a realm. Black Tower was more than just a spatial divine tool. On the contrary, this was probably its least important feature. Such a divine tool, if put in the divine realm, it's guaranteed to be fought over, not to mention one with a space that large, the rabbit concluded. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "You say it as if you've been to the divine realm." The rabbit snorted. It wanted to brag, but seeing Hu Nyo's fierce gaze sweep over, it instantly stopped. Ling Han said, "So, even if a shattering void tier elite charges over, I still have the ability to save myself. And our ambition is to split the skies." Split the skies? Yuan Chenghe and the Li siblings were all shocked. What was splitting the skies? Breaking open the skies and bringing the vast lands into the divine realm. Ling Han explained. What? Yuan Chenghe and the Li siblings were shocked numb. Did they hear wrong? This was too shocking. Bringing all the living spirits of an entire land, the divine realm. Could this be done? Splitting the skies is obviously very difficult, so everyone needs to cooperate and do their part, Ling Han said. He spoke roughly about founding a nation and splitting the skies, but didn't mention the conspiracy of the 5 great sects. Yuan Chenghe and the Li siblings listened as their blood boiled. They were youngsters and obviously all had great ambition, and was there a greater cause in the world than splitting open the skies? Young Master Han, I'm willing to follow you. Yuan Chenghe said loudly. Hehe, brother-in-law, if you don't mind my getting in the way, I'm also willing to do what little I can, Li Fengyu said. Good. Ling Han was extremely pleased. Chapter 7:14, This is a Beast Garden. Chapter 7:14, This is a Beast Garden. Reverie _Henyi. Everyone exited the Black Tower and continued to advance. After 2 days, they'd finally left the sea area. The place ahead was another stretch of flatlands, with occasional large trees and sporadic mountain peaks. It was as if they went back to place on the other side of the sea, for the scenery was almost unchanged. Could the large sea be the center of this mystery realm? Have we come around again? Is the precious treasure hidden in the sea? Everyone began suspect. Xiao, at this moment, a black shadow swept by in the skies, and with a close look, it turned out it was actually a pavilion. It wasn't sent flying, but instead grew out 2 legs and pranced over on the earth, disappearing in an instant. T. Ling Han and the others looked at each other, speechless. A ghost, or had it become spiritual? A pavilion actually grew legs and ran? Are my eyes blurred? Li Fengyu wiped his eyes. You're probably not the only one having a hard time seeing, Ling Han said. It wasn't possible that everyone's eyes were all blurred. Xiao. At this moment, several more figures swept by the sky at a surprising speed. Chem, the Lunar King, everyone cried out in surprise again. They recognized one of them that rode on a terrifying beast lion, which couldn't be any more obvious. Being able to stand side by side with the Lunar King, these people were probably all shattering void tier elites. Several great shattering void tier elites are chasing it together. That pavilion must contain surprising treasures, Yuan Chenghe said. Unfortunately, it's been targeted by shattering void tier elites, so there's no way we'll have any share. Li Fengyu sighed. With a smile, Ling Han said, that may not be the case. Opportunities don't have much to do with cultivation, and if these shattering void tier elites can obtain the treasures inside the pavilion, then wouldn't they have gotten it long ago? That's right, we may be able to obtain a share. Li Fengyu was excited again. But, a pavilion that can grow legs and run, this is too strange, right? Zhu Xian'er said. Li Fengyu nodded repeatedly, and said, maybe it'll eat all of us. Ling Han said, forget it, don't think about this problem now. Even shattering void tier elites can't catch up with it, let alone us. If it is to be, then this pavilion will appear in front of us. If it isn't to be, hey. Well, such a treasure was not something that they could obtain just by thinking about it. Their thoughts down to earth, the first thing was obviously not to hasten on their journey, but to eat a good meal. Ling Han took out a section of the tentacle beast's tentacle and refined it with might to make it shrink, condensing the essence. He then added precious medicine from the Black Tower to boil it together. The most precious was the Myriad's precious pearl, which Ling Han scraped to get some powder, which he placed in the pot. As it boiled, clear red clouds rose up as if they were boiling a divine beast's meat. The aroma permeated the air, making Hu Nyo and the gold-seeking rat jump up and down. Even the rabbit began to eat secretly along with them. After half a day, the pot of precious soup was finally finished, and everyone had a bowl ladled out to them. There were propagating vein-like patterns rising in the soup as if heaven and earth was revealing its profound secrets. This was a perfectly tonic soup. Nyo wants 2 bowls. No, 3 bowls. Nyo hadn't started eating and was already contending for food. Gigi. The gold-seeking rat jumped on Ling Han's shoulder and squeaked, meaning this baby also wants 3 bowls. Ling Han shrugged and said, everyone gets 1 bowl first, and those who can still drink, ladle out more yourselves. Everyone was full of ambition. How could a bowl of such a tonic soup be enough? But once 1 bowl was down the stomach, except for Ling Han and Nyo, everyone's bodies were gushing with multicolored light and their faces all red. How could they possibly take on a second bowl? Since everyone couldn't eat more, Ling Han and Nyo didn't even use a bowl. They surrounded the pot, scooped up the soup, and ate the meat, making the others call out for their freakishness. This pot of soup was greatly beneficial to progressing in their cultivation, and which medicine wasn't a great one? Eating it directly nourished their Tao flower and the spiritual infant, carving down vein-like patterns. The speed of growth was shockingly fast. In less than half a year, I can break through to the spiritual infant tier, Zhu Xian'er said, pleasantly surprised. She always worried because her cultivation was lower than Ling Han's, and her battle prowess was very much inferior as well, so she was unable to help Ling Han. Advancing into the spiritual infant tier, she finally wouldn't need to watch from the sidelines every time. The Li siblings and Yuan Cheng his gains were also great, making them unable to contain their joy. After resting, they departed again. This was still a paradise for beasts, with various powerful beasts emerging one after another. Most of them were in the spiritual infant and the deity transformation tier, and there were even a dozen heaven tier ones. Shattering void tier ones weren't seen for the time being, but that couldn't be a guarantee that there wasn't any. It was surprising. In one mystery realm, they actually saw 2 shattering void tier beasts, though not very powerful, and one already had been subdued by the Lunar King. Against other people, shattering void tier beasts would crush them overwhelmingly. After another 2 days, they finally walked out of this area. A stone door appeared in front, and looking back after passing through it, 2 words could be seen on it, Beast Garden. This is some ancient force's beast garden, a place where beast pets are bred. Everyone was frightened by such immense handiwork. Experts like them had to take 10 days just to pass through a beast garden. This was only to pass through it, and not to stroll through the entire area. The level of beasts is restricted by bloodline, and since they can reach the Shattering Void tier now, then their ancestors should have also been in the Shattering Void tier when they were bred here, Ling Han said. This was the most frightening aspect. This force could capture Shattering Void tier beasts and breed them. Why did this sound so much like dreaming? Only the ancient dynasty that sought to split the skies could be so bold and powerful, Ling Han thought. That ancient dynasty had once united all of the lands, but still fell short in the end, unable to split the skies. No wonder Shattering Void elites were in such a rush. This is extremely like to be the location of the imperial city of that ancient dynasty. Mystical treasures. Everyone felt as if they were on pins and needles. This was a genuine treasure vault of an ancient dynasty. They advanced in a hurry, but after the flatlands was a desert with a boundless expanse of yellow sand everywhere. If it weren't for the fireball that never changed position in the sky, they would be very likely to have lost their way. Like this, they went on for 3 more days, and suddenly a palace appeared in front of them. The residence of the ancient emperor? After they walked over, they then discovered that it wasn't so. The plaque on the palace gates had the 2 words, Tool Pavilion, written on it. As the name implied, Tool Pavilion was obviously a place where treasured tools were kept. There were many people around the palace. The treasure was clearly in front of them, but they didn't go further. There was only one possibility: they were obstructed and couldn't enter. Ling Han and the others walked over, and after asking a few people, they found out that there was a metal puppet keeping watch by the Tool Pavilion's entrance. To enter the building, one had to pass its test first. Forcibly charging through without passing its test, one would only be killed on the spot. What test? Chapter 7:15 Leaving one's name on a stone tablet. Chapter 7:15 Leaving one's name on a stone tablet. Reverie _ Henyi. The test was very simple, and it wasn't to fight this puppet. One only had to place one's palm on a stone tablet, and if a light shined, one would qualify to enter the tool pavilion. It sounded easy, but there was only a meager lot that could make the stone tablet light up. Other than the powerful figures of the older generation, only Yarrow Hui Yu, Shu Xiu Ran, Dong Linga, and a few others could do so. There were still newly arrived people who asked curiously, "You just put your hand on the stone tablet?" Of course not. You have to meditate on all your arts and skills in your consciousness, and the stone tablet will magnify the powers of these mystic techniques to their extremes, thereby evaluating your extreme battle prowess, a gaffer said. This is a martial arts stone, a treasure in the legends. Even if you're only at the flower blossom tier, you might surpass shattering void tier elites because this evaluation is extreme battle prowess, or, in other words, placing everyone's tier on the same level and then making a battle prowess comparison. Such a ranking should be called a ranking of potential. It's possible that you can't even reach close to this level in the future, and it's also possible that you'll have a fortuitous meeting and surpass it in the future. It's all uncertain. The gaffer said, "See that, the stone tablet has 100 names. If your extreme battle prowess can surpass any of theirs, you can rank amongst them. The stronger your battle prowess is predicted to be in the future, the higher you can rank." However, although this mystery realm opened for the first time in several 10 millennia, it's extremely like that this martial arts stone has recorded all the geniuses in the near 1,000 millennia, and even several thousand millennia. Being able to leave a name on there, even if it's only the last name, they all are super geniuses of several tens of millennia. Hearing the gaffer's words, everyone was somewhat excited. If they could leave their name on the tablet, then wouldn't it mean surpassing the ancients and amazing the contemporaries? But the difficulty was too high. Some had already entered the tool pavilion, but none of them left their name on the stone tablet. Linghan looked over. The person ranked first on the stone tablet was actually called first. Who knew where he got his courage from, assuming that he would be the first and never the last? The second name was much more modest, Yuan Shi. The third name was Sai Fang, the fourth name was Yu Ying, the fifth name was Yu, the seventh name was Mo, the eighth name was Ming Dao, the ninth name was Donkey Riding Old Man, and the 10th name was Ju Dao. Linghan looked all the way down. Each name was extremely foreign to him. However, when he came to the 99th name, a familiar name finally jumped into the eye, the Lunar King. He was shocked. Had the Lunar King left this just now, or was it, several tens of millennia ago? If it was the latter, would the Purple Moon Empire and this ancient dynasty be somehow connected? Linghan was absorbed in thought for a moment. Only when Zhu Xian called him a few times did he come back to his senses. "Let's go try." They pushed their way through the crowd, trying to squeeze to the front. Some people were easygoing. They had already tried and failed, and didn't mind letting others try. However, some people were bad-tempered and even envious. Since they couldn't get in, they didn't want others to go in, either. There was no need to be polite to such people. Linghan simply attacked, "Xiao, Xiao, Xiao," and a road-blocking dog was waved away like a scarecrow. Wang, in front, the stone tablet lit up, which meant someone passed the test and could enter the tool pavilion. That's Wenren Chen Chen. As expected of the proud daughter of heaven. It said her strength is second only to Dong Linga's, and sure enough. TSK, do you know what sort of light appeared when Dong Linga passed? I don't know. I'll tell you, then. The martial arts stone can only let out light in 3 colors. One's red, one's green, and one's purple. Among them, purple light represents the weakest battle prowess, while red light is the strongest. Just now, Wenren Chen Chen actuated purple light. But Dong Linga activated red light. With that said, everyone nodded their heads. While also a proud daughter of heaven, Wenren Chen Chen was still a large distance away from Dong Linga. Brother Ling. Seeing Linghan, Wenren Chen Chen couldn't help but stop and didn't enter the tool pavilion immediately. Such a short while didn't matter anyway. She wanted to personally see Linghan's extreme battle prowess. Although this didn't represent the heights that Linghan could reach in the future, it could still be used as reference. Linghan nodded in a greeting. "Chem, Jioming's here." Everyone dispersed. This was a vicious god that killed without scruples, but he was Earth Dragon sect's most valued disciple of the next generation. Who would dare to harm him even in self-defense? Jiaming walked over with large strides. A terrifying aura rose all over his body, turning into giant snakes. Linghan frowned. Jiaming's cultivation had made an astonishing leap and reached the deity transformation tier. He'd once said that the Great Sea had something fortunate for him, and it indeed seemed so if it was enough for him to advance into the deity transformation tier in a few days. Amongst the younger generation, currently, only Xu Xiuran had done it. However, wasn't the Earth Dragon an earthworm? So why did the majority of Earth Dragon sect's people manifest the shadow of a large snake? Although they were all long and twisted things, there was still a big difference between snakes and earthworms, right? Jiaming's walked majestically, his aura as if an ancient brutish beast was hidden in his body, extremely terrifying. As the earth roared, he walked at the front of the martial arts stone. He first gave Ling Han a murderous look, and then stretched out his hand and pressed towards the martial arts stone. Wang, the martial arts stone immediately lit up. Purple light. However, Jiaming didn't withdraw his hand and continued to press. The color that the martial arts stone emitted changed to green. His meant that Jiaming's extreme battle prowess improved, which was very normal. Pressing one's hand on the tablet, one needed to perform one's own mystic arts, and after the martial arts stone accepted it and continued to extrapolate, the evaluated extreme battle prowess would then be displayed again. Therefore, one's highest battle prowess couldn't be exceeded, but couldn't be concealed. My battle prowess will break the ancients and the contemporaries. Jiaming shouted loudly as qi and blood surged all over his body, forming terrifying pressure. Hong, the people nearby fell onto the ground, unable to withstand the impact. Ling Han's expression turned stern. His and Jiaming's strengths were originally almost on par. Now that Jiaming crossed into the deity transformation tier, Ling Han would definitely be inferior except in terms of physical arts. If Jiaming's battle prowess skyrocketed to the heaven tier, then Ling Han would really be in trouble. It turned red. My goodness. Everyone cried out with their hands on their heads. An exceptional genius as expected, making the martial arts stone display a red color and sharing the limelight with Ling Donga and Xu Xiuran. Ah! Jiaming roared again, the veins on his forehead popped, and the shadow of a giant snake surfaced behind him, letting out hissing sounds. Wang, the martial arts stone displayed a black light. The 100 names all disappeared, and the stone tablet showed the words, "Leave a name." Jiaming's strength reached the level comparable to the ancient geniuses, and he could rank in the top 100. Chapter 716, Lighting Up with Each Step. Chapter 716, Lighting Up with Each Step. Reverie _Henyi. Everyone cried out in surprise. It was too shocking. With so many ancient prodigies, only 100 people could leave their names, and all of them were geniuses amongst geniuses. Taking anyone out casually could astonish through the ages, right? Jiaming being able to leave his name, he was too strong. This was something that Dong Linga and Xu Xiuran couldn't do. Jiaming smiled proudly and wrote down his name on the stone tablet swiftly and boldly. Instantly, the stone tablet let out a dazzling light again, and the 100 names reappeared. Jiaming's name shockingly ranked in the 97th place, while the original 100th place couldn't be seen anymore. The 97th place, higher than the Lunar King by 3 places. Now, the Lunar King already dropped to the 100th place. Jiaming was somewhat astonished, seeming to be somewhat displeased by this record, but he immediately revealed a smile at the corner of his lips and took a few steps back, sweeping Ling Han with his gaze and revealing a contemptuous look. Having a name on the ranks, what did this mean? It was to be equals with the strongest historical genius Sesto, be a super freak that came once in several tens of millennia. Chen Chen. Jiaming looked towards Wenren Chen, his expression proud, which meant look at my freakishness, come grovel at my feet now. Although Wenren Chen was shocked inside, she disliked like Jiaming's proud personality even more. Geniuses indeed could be proud, but proud to the point of looking at everyone from above, this was repugnant. She focused her beautiful eyes on Ling Han. This was also a freak who might have a shocking performance. Zhu Xian Yuan Cheng He, and the others walked up separately, undergoing the test one by one. Without surprise, although the Li siblings qualified to enter the Restore Heaven Academy, they didn't cause the reaction of the martial arts stone. Only Zhu Xian and Yuan Cheng he succeeded, but they both summoned the purple-colored light, equaling Wenren Qian. However, this wasn't a test of their martial arts talent or aptitude, but simply the maximization of the arts they currently grasped, placing them in the same tier for comparison and ranking. So, one didn't have to care too much about activating the martial arts stone, since there was still a chance to catch up in the future. Besides, this was a ranking that took martial arts skill and techniques and extrapolated them to the extreme, but even geniuses might not be able to achieve the said extreme. The rabbit also went for a try. Quite surprisingly, it actually activated a red light, and could rank alongside Xu Xiuran and Dong Linga. However, this was not necessarily the rabbit's full power, and Dong Linga and Xu Xiuran also might not have operated their strongest martial arts skill. After all, everyone only needed the qualification to enter, and many people weren't willing to reveal their secrets. Ling Han, I'll let you live a little longer. After you take the test, I'll kill you then. Jiaming laughed loudly, and said, I'll show you the gap between you and me and have you die with regret. This is the result of going against me. You can't fight here, right? Someone whispered. Yes, fighting isn't allowed. That puppet will step in and directly kill those who don't heed the warning. Earlier, there was someone who suffered, someone else added. Jiaming came late, so he doesn't know. Although voices of such discussion were small, Jiaming, with his strength, couldn't possibly not hear it, immediately revealing an irritated look. He'd put out big talk yet couldn't do it. Wasn't this a fierce slap across the face? Ling Han couldn't help but laugh and shake his head, walking in large strides to the martial arts stone. He said, a frog at the bottom of a well. What's so hard about simply making the ranks? Such high-sounding sentiments, then I'll wait and see, Jiaming said coldly. Ling Han pressed his hand and used the desolate hell sword, but the martial arts stone didn't react at all. Apparently, this set of sword techniques extrapolated to the extreme couldn't quality to receive the martial arts stone's recognition. Ha! Jiaming scoffed. Hold your horses, such a grown man yet so impatient. Ling Han sneered. Jiaming instantly wanted to kill someone. He'd lived in the wild for a long time, fighting and killing beasts all day. Killing people and killing beasts were no different to him. Whatever made him displeased, he would want to kill. However, when he saw the metal puppet that guarded the premise at the gate, he snorted and suppressed the killing intent within. For now, he couldn't beat this puppet, carved with extremely complex formation patterns, which were definitely of the 10th tier. Oh, then you'd better hurry, don't take the latrine pit and take a *T and keep the people behind waiting, he said insipidly. Barbarian. Ling Han scowled. No wonder you've always been a savage, and I don't expect that you could be civilized. However, the most important thing is to know oneself, and you clearly have no culture and still shout like a loudspeaker all day, polluting the environment everywhere. Many people instantly burst out laughing, but covered their mouths immediately in fear that Jiaming would hold a grudge. Jiaming was in the deity transformation tier and definitely an extremely powerful warrior in the deity transformation tier. Only shattering void tier and heaven tier elites could suppress him. However, how many elites like this could there be in the world, and how many would dare not give the 5 great sects face to suppress him? Jiaming indeed had the right to run amok. Ling Han changed to operating the 3 styles of black origin in his consciousness. Wang, the martial arts stone immediately lit up, but it was only the most normal colors, purple light. This moved Ling Han slightly. This sword technique of the Heaven's Sword sect could only make the martial arts stone emit the lowest level light of recognition. This sword technique was extremely remarkable. The last move, breaking limits, needed sword heart to actuate, which showed its high level. But as the martial arts stone saw it, this only passed the first stage of recognition. TSK. Jiaming sneered again. He obviously knew that Ling Han's strength could definitely cause the reaction of the martial arts stone, and even equal Xu Xiuran and Ling Donga. Purple light was not something strange at all. However, he definitely didn't think that Ling Han could leave his name on the ranking. This was too difficult, and probably only one person from each generation could rise into the list, and the further in the future, the more difficult it would be because there were already too many geniuses before them. Wen Ren Qian and Zhu Xian were more nervous. They obviously hoped that Ling Han could suppress Jiao Ming, and with the slight changes in their faces and gazes, Jiao Ming's killing intent flourished even more. Ling Han also activated the Eye of Truth, and instantly, the light that the martial arts stone emitted changed from purple to green, entering the second level. Hiss, this guy's also a genius, to actually be able to activate green light. No wonder he's targeted by Jiao Ming. You're excited too easily. Don't you know his Restore Heaven Academy's Ling Han? What, that heaven-grade alchemist? Who else other than him? What a true monster, attaining such accomplishments in alchemy, and being just as terrifying in martial arts, absolutely inhuman. Everyone cried out one after another. This was unimaginable to them, so they obviously thought it strange. Jiao Ming was obviously displeased and gave a loud snort. Instantly, the whispers in the surroundings all disappeared. Now, there really wasn't anyone who dared to offend him. Even the older elites weren't willing to make an enemy of him. He was a youngster filled with potential, and would definitely become a shattering void tier elite in the future. Besides, the Earth Dragon sect stood behind him, and they couldn't kill him while he was still undeveloped, so they definitely couldn't offend him. Chapter 717, Rank 1. Chapter 717, Rank 1. Reverie Henyi. Ling Han smiled and performed the thunderclap ninth heaven in his consciousness. Wang, the light that the martial arts stone emitted immediately changed from green to red. Seeing this scene, Jiao Ming's expression was somewhat grave. If Ling Han could be a little stronger, he might really be able to leave his name on the martial arts stone. Ling Han no longer performed the 3 styles of black origin, and instead operated the annihilating dragon star arrow. When the 3 mystical powers were used simultaneously, his divine sense turned into a small person and flickered like lightning inside the consciousness, firing out annihilating dragon star arrow. It couldn't be helped. The 3 styles of black origin and the annihilating dragon star arrow were conflicting with each other and couldn't be executed simultaneously. Otherwise, operating 10 heaven gradesword techniques simultaneously could at least rival 3 styles of black origin and other such ultimate moves, right? Wang, the light that the martial arts stone emitted changed again from red to black. Instantly, the stone tablets' names all disappeared, and the words reappeared again, leave a name. This explained that Ling Han's future battle prowess could surpass past geniuses and squeeze into top 100. I'm about to go crazy. Another genius that could surpass ancient geniuses appeared again. Did my eyes go blurry? Such a genius should only appear once in a generation. What's going on? 2 mighty geniuses side by side, would the future be their power struggle? Not necessarily. This is just their extreme battle prowess in the future, and not what's guaranteed to be achieved. Besides, Xu Xiuran and Dong Ling definitely held back. They're definitely no weaker than Jiao Ming. That's right. There's also Heaven's Sword Sect's Small Sword Emperor and Azure Thunder Sect's Son of Lightning who haven't come. They're no weaker, either. Everyone spoke one after another, but this didn't cover Ling Han's limelight. He was a freak that could contend with the 5 great sects' strongest geniuses. Ling Han casually wrote down his name, and in a short while, the martial arts stone changed. His name rose into the list, while Lunar King's name was squeezed out of the top 100. Rank 78. This record moved everyone visibly, and made Jiao Ming's expression pale, but it was also somewhat unacceptable for Ling Han. 3 mystical powers executed together actually only ranked 78th. It wasn't his lower tier that resulted in low rank. The mystical powers were extrapolated to the extreme or compared in the same tier. In the ancient times, there were still 77 geniuses that were still above him. Hiss. How many mystical powers did these guys grasp? Ling Han was shocked inside, but his confidence didn't suffer a hit, because this wasn't his complete battle prowess, or rather potential. He still hadn't executed 9 dragons tyrant body art and indestructible heaven scroll, which weren't conflicting with each other and could be executed together. Especially the indestructible heaven scrollet was the scripture that the Black Tower passed down. Whatever, he didn't have to be number 1 in history. Ling Han retreated a few steps, smiled at Jiao Ming, and said, frog at the bottom of a well, have you gained some knowledge and experience yet? 78th versus 97th was, of course, an absolute crush. Get out the way. Jioming walked over and pressed his right hand on the martial arts stone again. I didn't even use my full power earlier. What? Everyone was greatly shocked and in disbelief. Being able to squeeze into the top 100 throughout history actually wasn't done with his full strength. How freakish was this guy, really? Was this going to be heaven-defying? Jioming stood still, but his black hair stood on ends, soaring towards the sky as if there was wind blowing from below, each strand of hair fluttering in the wind. A great snake's shadow appeared behind him again, but it was transforming from a flat and pointed snake head to a circular head as if it had become an earthworm. This wasn't a normal earthworm. It was as if a divine beast from the beginning of the world, emitting a primitive presence. The veins on his forehead throbbed constantly, each muscle trembling, and the power of his body was so terrifying as if a light punch could shatter a mountain, overturn a sea, and even strike down the stars in the sky. Wang, black light reappeared on the martial arts stone, but this time, the words "leave a name" didn't appear. Instead, Jioming's name improved from 97th to 51th place. What mystic art did he use to surpass nearly 50 ancient geniuses? Although it was only around 50 places, how many years and generations of geniuses was that the accumulation of? What he surpassed was generation after generation. Everyone felt as if they were on pins and needles. What sort of freak was this? But, seeing the 50 names above Jioming was even more terrifying. These names had remained the same throughout the ages, and just how powerful were they at the time? Even Ling Han somewhat at a loss for words. In other words, when Jioming extrapolated the mystic arts he'd grasped to the extreme, he could even surpass 3 mystical powers. Ha 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 ha. Jioming let go, took a few steps back, and looked disdainfully at Ling Han. Now, who's the frog at the bottom of the well? Parroted and unoriginal. Ling Han shook his head. You think that you're the only one who held back? Toad, move out the way, this time I'll make you totally convince. Jioming's body shivered involuntarily. Could Ling Han also have held back? Impossible, impossible. Charging all the way to 78th place, how could he possibly have held back? He was definitely pretending, definitely. Ling Han reached out with his hand and pressed it on the martial arts stone, operating indestructible heaven's scroll only. Hong, black light was immediately emitted from the stone, and Ling Han's rank skyrocketed. 60, 50, 40, 30, it was so fast that it was like fireworks. Even Ling Han himself was shocked, because he'd only operated a part of indestructible heaven's scroll, and not all of it. Moreover, he'd only grasped the first layer of the indestructible heaven's scroll. 20, 10, 9, 8, 7, 3, 2, 1. He went straight to first place, knocking off first that was in first place. Unprecedented, the world's number 1. OSHA *T. Motherfuck. Everyone began to shout obscenities, completely unable to believe it. This was too shocking, directly crushing all geniuses throughout the ages and ranking first. Was it possible that Ling Han would become the most powerful person in the history of the vast lands? Ling Han didn't continue to operate the indestructible heaven's scroll. Since he'd already charged up to number 1, there was no meaning in continuing. He retracted his hand with a smile, and said, sorry, I'm usually low-key, and suddenly being high-profile for once, I don't feel too well. Everyone was speechless. No matter how fake it sounded, Ling Han's potential was plain to see. If he could really push the mystic art he grasped to the extreme, his battle prowess would be the strongest ever. The eyes of all the women present had lit up. The first in history. Who didn't want to become the wife of the first in history? Such a title was also full of temptation. Jioming's expression was pale. He'd originally wanted to completely suppress Ling Han, but, unexpectedly, he helped Ling Han and became a stepping stone. After all, without him as a comparison, who would know the bearing of being number 1? Now that it was clear, besides, he was only at the 51st place after struggling desperately, which was how many ranks away from Ling Han? Chapter 718, Another Number 1. Chapter 718, Another Number 1. Reverie _ Henyi. Jioming immediately calmed his mind. This was only the height that Ling Han could reach in the future, and did not represent that his current battle prowess wasn't a match for Ling Han's. It was quite the contrary. His had a fortuitous meeting in the sea, and his cultivation rocketed to the deity transformation tier. His current battle prowess definitely crushed Ling Han's. Once he had the chance, he would definitely kill Ling Han. Nyo wants to try. Nyo wants to try. Hu Nyo ran over, tittering with joy. This seemed very amusing to her. Ha 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 ha. Some people immediately laughed loudly. What was a small little girl doing, butting in? Don't underestimate her. She entered the Restore Heaven Academy based on her own strength, and even defeated many experts. Someone knew Hu Nyo's background. This instantly made even more people spurt out air from their mouths in shock. She, a little girl 7 to 8 years of age. Was that possible? Small little girl, don't butt in and get out of this lord's way. An old man was displeased and obstructed the way. Earlier, he'd tolerated it, but a little girl also wanted to cut in line. He couldn't tolerate it. How dare you block Nyo's path? Hu Nyo was infuriated and immediately punched with her small fist. Send you flying. A small little girl dares to be impudent in front of this lord. The old man attacked, snatching at Hu Nyo's neck. He was going to toss Hu Nyo away. However, Hu Nyo's figure flashed and immediately disappeared from under his hand, and she was already behind him when she reappeared, throwing a kick. Peng, the old man was kicked, flying magnificently out of the crowd, and landed on the surrounding yellow sand. Damn it! The old man was embarrassed. To be kicked on the butt and sent flying by a little girl, would he still have the face to see people in the future? He immediately charged back, but before attacking, he was grabbed by a metal puppet as if a chick seized by an eagle, having no power to fight back. He struggled, and shouted, "Why only catch this lord?" Yes, everyone also wanted to ask. Attacking was prohibited here, and the metal puppet would immediately stop whomever attacked anyone. But now? Clearly, Hu Nyo was the one who attacked first, so why didn't the puppet stop her, but instead restrain the victim? Hu Nyo glared, and said, "Big monster, you dare to seize Hu Nyo?" The metal puppet actually took a step back as if it feared her. Everyone just wanted to hold their heads and shout, "How is this possible?" The puppet, something completely without feeling, didn't know fear, so why would it feel fear facing Hu Nyo? Hu Nyo laughed loudly and walked to the martial arts stone with hands on her hips. Just as she reached her small hand out, she was annoyed, and said angrily, "Damn it, it's too high." She had to stand on the tips of her toes and stretch out her arm to reach it. Everyone couldn't help but smile. This little girl was quite merry. Hu Nyo jumped directly onto the martial arts stone. Everyone saw this as greatly disrespectful since the names of geniuses throughout the ages were left on there, but even the metal puppet showed no reaction, so what were they getting stirred up for? Hu Nyo placed her small hand on the stone tablet, but there was no reaction at all. Not to mention a black light, even the purple light didn't emerge. She was infuriated, and said, "This broken rock's damage." Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "Treat this stone as your enemy, and then, in your head, think of how you'll beat it up. So that's how it works." Hu Nyo giggled and closed her eyes. She pouted, looking like she was clenching her teeth in anger. Wang, the martial arts stone immediately lit up and black light rose directly, turning into the words, "Leave a name." T, another freak that could leave a name on the list. What was going on? There were already 2 freaks, one of which ranked first throughout history, and now, a little girl of 7 to 8 years of age could also enter the ranking. Such a little girl, what mystic arts could she possibly know? Sigh, could they even call themselves geniuses, even falling short of a little girl? Hu Nyo scrawled on the stone tablet, leaving the words, "Ling Han is Nyo's." She giggled and took a few steps back contentedly, admiring her own masterpiece. She said, "Ling Han, are Nyo's words beautiful?" "Beautiful like they're dancing," Ling Han said with a smile. The black light faded, and everyone immediately started to search for where Ling Han is Nyo's would rank. They all started from the last place, but in the 90s, it wasn't there. In the 80s, it wasn't there. In the 70s, it wasn't there. No, 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 they couldn't see the words from all the way. You guys, look at the first row, someone said in a quavering voice. Everyone looked towards the stone tablet's first row and shockingly saw Ling Han's nose at the first place, pushing down Ling Han, who had just risen to the first place. The original first now dropped to the third place, appearing somewhat awkward. The original first ranking first was extremely awe-inspiring, and now that it ranked third, though it was still rare in the past and present, it didn't live up to its reputation and became a laughingstock. Everyone looked back and forth between Hunyo and the name on the stone tablet and just couldn't connect the number 1 battle prowess throughout the ages with this little girl. They were still in shock with Ling Han breaking history and honorably rising to number 1 in battle prowess. The first shock hadn't faded, yet another arose, making them somewhat numb. Was it a dream? It just seemed too unreal. Yay, Nyo's first place. Hunyo shouted excitedly. Ia Ming's face turned green. Forget that he couldn't beat Ling Han, but even a little girl's future battle prowess was above his. How could he accept it? His confidence was going to be blown. This was really too great of a blow. Ling Han didn't find it strange at all. It was very likely that an extremely terrifying existence was hidden in Hunyo's body, so what if she crushed all the geniuses through the ages? And he also didn't fully operate indestructible heaven's scroll, so it was normal to be below Hunyo. He obviously wouldn't contend with Hunyo. With a smile, he said, "Come on, let's ignore that toad and go in and have a look." Okay. Hunyo held Ling Han's hand, and as one adult and one child walked towards the tool pavilion, the metal puppet stepped aside as if to show respect. Zhu Xian and Yuan Cheng he followed behind, feeling the limelight on their faces and extremely proud. Everyone was astonished because those who passed the test all went around the puppet. Could this be the special treatment for those who left their names on the ranking list? Brother Ling. When Ren Chen caught up in a hurry, her eyes sparkling. This time, she really wanted to get to know Ling Han and talk a little. First of all time, no, the first two of all time. Jiao Ming snorted and walked towards the tool pavilion, also trying to walk in imposingly, but that puppet blocked him, and had no intention of moving aside. Jiao Ming almost exploded with anger. Everyone made it into the ranking, so why didn't he have special treatment as well? He had to walk around, his expression livid. Too fucking unfair. Chapter 719 Formation Sword. Chapter 719 Formation Sword. Reverie _Henyi. After entering the tool pavilion, they were in a hall with stairs leading to the second floor on both sides. Judging from the height of this floor, the tool pavilion was probably 5 stories tall. What weapon do you use? A voice sounded next to Ling Han's ear. Ling Han was startled, and said to everyone, "Did you guys all hear that sound?" "I heard it. It asked me what weapon I use," everyone said. Ling Han nodded, and said, "Sword." Xiao, just as he'd finished speaking, his figure disappeared from the hall and appeared in a sealed room. The door was tightly shut, and it seemed that he was directly teleported in here. For an ancient dynasty, such a method wasn't unusual. Ling Han didn't panic. By the looks of it now, everyone was transported to a different room because of the different weapons they used. However, why weren't the ones who used swords together? This probably had to do with their record. The better their record, the more advanced the room they could enter. He looked around and saw an empty stone room. In the middle of it was a stone table with a sword in a scabbard. Even if the sword was not out of its sheath, Ling Han could sense a terrifyingly vicious qi hitting his face. It was full of danger. A swordsman's weapon. Ling Han was shocked. It wasn't like he'd never seen treasured sword. She even had a 10th tier spirit tool in his hand, but just from this vicious qi alone, the demon birth sword was far from being comparable to this sword. It was like this sword had been made for killing. Ling Han walked over, but when he was 3 meters away, this sword popped out of its sheath. Leaving roughly 30 centimeters, and Wang, 7 sword lights intertwined and charged towards him. The power of these sword lights was only at the spiritual infant tier, which was the same as his tier. Ling Han was obviously unafraid, and crossed his arms in front of him to take this blow head on. Pu. His body was forced back a distance of 7 steps, and 7 wounds shockingly appeared on his arms, gushing out red blood. Ling Han couldn't help but be greatly surprised. What was his physique? It was comparable to 8th tier rare metals. Theoretically, it was very hard for even deity transformation tier attacks to deal damage to him, but this was only 7 spiritual infant tier sword lights, yet they made him bleed. How could this not be surprising? Power didn't represent battle prowess, and represented destructive power even less. Ling Han knew this very well. For example, using the same power, if one hit wood with an iron rod, compared to hitting wood with an axe, would damage dealt be equal? Power was only a part of it. Ling Han revealed a smile. He wanted this sword, so he had to conquer this sword first. Interesting. He was in the spiritual infant tier, so this sword could only display spiritual infant tier power, fighting him on the same tier. However, battle prowess was uncertain. This sword light was filled with destructive power, and if his physique was still at the Iron Sheet tier, forcibly taking that blow would definitely have severed his arm, or even his entire body. Like him, at the spiritual infant tier, yet it could kill those in the deity transformation tier. Haha, fighting in the same tier? Then let's compare. Ling Han charged out. He was quite interested in this sword. Could it also be a 10th tier spirit tool, being able to strike out such fierce sword light? Shio, 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 flash after flash, sword light shot out, striking him. Ling Han swung his fists to parry. The sword lights were truly fierce, the power of each reaching peak stage of the spiritual infant tier, and its lethality far surpassed Itaven. His physique could be injured, but that was all. He cultivated the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and his physique was like an indestructible diamond. He stared at that sword. There were many patterns on the blade, but they weren't martial intent, they were formation patterns. Although his formation level hadn't improved much, it wasn't hard to make such a judgment. This wasn't a spirit tool, but a formation's eye? Ling Han was really shocked this time. Could this sword be a formation that was taking the initiative to attack him? Pu, 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 blood constantly splashed across his body. This formation sword was really too terrifying, cutting him so that he bled ceaselessly and couldn't get close. He activated the Thunderclap 9th Heaven and used the Demon Fairy Step, no longer fighting the sword lights recklessly. This would bring no results. In terms of power, this sword was at the advantage, and he would only be knocked back. Shio, 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 the sword lights shot out, but Ling Han traveled freely through the gaps between them, steadily approaching the sword. When Ling Han was only a step away from this sword, the entire blade popped out of its sheath, and a dazzling light instantly soared into the sky, its baleful presence ablaze. With each sword light repeated 7 times, a total of 49 flashes of sword light shot out simultaneously and intertwined into a dense web, forcing Ling Han back again. Apparently, pressured by Ling Han, this sword also unleashed stronger might. Its power was still in the spiritual infant tier, but its destructive power increased by a whole lot. Ling Han's arm was struck by the sword once again. This time, the wound was much deeper, almost to the bone. The sword was suspended in the sky as if an invisible hand was controlling it. Then, the sword point pointed at Ling Han and emitted a threatening chill. What level formation is this exactly? Ling Han stared at the blade's formation patterns. He couldn't recognize this formation at all, and only 2 things were certain. Firstly, its power was terrifyingly large, and if it exploded with full power, it could probably kill shattering void tier elites. Secondly, this formation was flawed and incomplete. Too shocking, an incomplete formation had such power, then how terrifying would it be when repaired? I'll make you submit. Ling Han felt a rush of haughtiness and unleashed the demon birth sword. Without activating the martial intent within, he executed Mysterious 3000, counterattacking against that sword. Ling Han was afraid that the 2 swords would both be fully on if he activated the demon birth sword's martial intent, and then he would just be an adornment. Moreover, the demon birth sword might not be able to suppress this formation sword, and he'd be doomed if it were the other way around. As expected, as the demon birth sword didn't unleash its might, the formation sword still maintained the power of spiritual infant tier, but the sword light's destructive power was still terrifying. Ling Han reckoned that if all the students of the Restore Heaven Academy fought together, they would still be annihilated by this sword. Ling Han's battle prowess was fully unleashed, with the Eye of Truth and the Thunderclap Ninth Heaven all activated, and his physical strength was also unleashed to the extreme, his battle prowess exploding. It far surpassed the spiritual infant tier, and could even strike down peak stage deity transformation tier elites, but against this sword, it was just on par. No, to be correct, Ling Han was probably still at a slight disadvantage. After all, this sword suppressed its tier to fight him, and had an innate advantage. Ling Han refused to accept it. Moreover, the stronger this sword was, the more he wanted to obtain it. He wielded the Demon Birth Sword with his right hand and slashed out a sword light, using the power of bone symbols along with it. Moving left and right to eliminate the power in the sword light, he continued to charge forth, and even if he was bombarded by a few sword lights, he was going to grab this sword with his hand. Without a tool spirit, he could put the sword inside the black tower. Suppressing it would be easier this way. Chapter 720, To Couple Hardness with Softness. Chapter 720, To Couple Hardness with Softness. Henyi, Henyi. It was easier said than done. When Ling Han was too close, the sword would unleash even stronger might, sweeping down a sky full of sword lights. It could be seen clearly that the sword light formed a formation, which increased the destructive power. It was difficult, very difficult to deal with. Ling Han seemed to be facing a hedgehog, and didn't know where to start. He would be terribly hurt no matter what. How could it be suppressed? Ling Han frowned. His physique sufficed, his recovery power sufficed, and he didn't fear being hurt by the sword light. But, the problem was that he was inferior in power, and once he was too close, the formation sword shot out endless sword lights, which couldn't be dodged at all, forcibly pushing him backwards. It was just absolutely cheating. How could it be obtained? Ling Han used the Eye of Truth, which was useless. The sword light was interwoven so closely that there wasn't a shred of a crack, and even if he turned into a fly, he wouldn't be able to fly through. There was no solution. Completely unsolvable. How could it be done? Ling Han thought of countermeasures. First, he could unleash the Heaven Transformation Bowl to absorb it directly. However, this was inappropriate. Not to mention whether it was absorbable or not, even if it was, Heaven Transformation Bowl's function was to refine all things and extract their essence. After this formation sword was absorbed, Ling Han didn't know whether it could become a divine material, but the formation patterns on it would definitely be gone. The formation patterns were what he wanted. Then, how about trying the demonic pattern on his left hand? It came from the refinement of Azura Demon Emperor's demonic chi, which Small Tower said contained the power of laws, and its destructive power was extremely amazing. Up till now, Ling Han still hadn't tested out its limits. Perhaps it could eliminate the sword light. Let's test it out. He charged towards the formation sword again and extended his left hand. The black demonic pattern appeared and pressed towards the sword light. The sword light immediately shattered. It works. Ling Han exulted, marching straight in to collect this treasured sword, but the next moment, the sword emitted a terrifying killing intent and vein-like patterns lit up as it completely activated. Sh**T, a fully resuscitated murderous sword is comparable to a shattering void tier elite. Now that was big trouble. Xiao, sword light was ablaze, charging towards Ling Han. It was a murderous sword of the shattering void tier. Ling Han immediately hid in the black tower. He was currently completely unqualified to challenge a shattering void tier elite, and the best strategy was to escape. The formation sword lost its target and soon dimmed down. Ling Han was extremely gloomy. The demonic patterns were also a part of him, so after he used the demonic patterns, why did the formation sword fully activate to the point of being so hostile? Unreasonable, so unreasonable. How could it be taken? Small Tower, what can you do? Ling Han said. Small Tower swayed, appearing before him, and said, with your current abilities, it's impossible to take that sword. The formation patterns on it are formed by this realm's laws, and though not very complete, it's already reached a very high level. I simply used the demonic pattern, so why did this sword fully activate? Ling Han said, puzzled. Because both are powers of law, So they'll activate each other, Small Tower answered, and then said disdainfully, they're all just the weakest powers of law that I can annihilate with a slight shake. This guy was being arrogant again. Linghan shrugged, and said, what use is your saying it? It can't help me retrieve this sword. Small Tower paused, as if hesitating, and after a while it said, it's not impossible. What's the method? Linghan was pleasantly surprised. Taking its time, Small Tower said, you cultivate the indestructible heaven scroll, reaching the diamond tier, but you've now only grasped the power of extreme hardness. However, the real diamond body is not just stubbornly hard, but it couples hardness with softness. Couples hardness with softness. What do you mean? Linghan asked. Hardness can't last long as it's easy to break. Simply seeking the extreme of hardness isn't the extreme of defense, Small Tower explained. You've now reached the peak of humanity in the hardness aspect, and it's about time to walk the soft side. How? Linghan became interested in this topic, but he was in no hurry to ask how to resolve the formation sword's attacks. Didn't you absorb blood-sucking origin gold? Small Tower suddenly said. Blood-sucking origin gold is a typical example of coupling hardness with softness. It can be hard like metal and soft like fingers, and when bearing great force, it can even stretch out to offset great force and not break. Linghan suddenly remembered, and said, I once punched Jiaming, but his neck stretched shockingly for 30 meters, dampening the power of the punch. Yes, that's coupling hardness with softness. You cultivate one side of the indestructible heaven's scroll, reaching the diamond body. It's impossible for anyone to be harder than you in the same tier. However, you still haven't started on the soft side, so in terms of physique, you're not invincible at the same tier, Small Tower said. Then how can it be done? Linghan asked. Small Tower said, people and all living beings are made up of countless particles, and the effect of any physical art is to increase the toughness of these particles. However, if you think from another angle, the combination of the particles isn't fixed, so why can't it be broken? Countless rocks form a great wall, but they can also form a tall tower. On the assumption of having the same number of rocks and that they don't shatter, there can be infinite transformations. How many particles are in a person's body? Countless. So, your transformation is also endless. That's the beauty of living beings, having countless possibilities, unlike treasured tools and puppets, which are fixed. Linghan was instantly enlightened. Small Tower didn't impart him any mystic arts, yet pushed open a new door for him, allowing him to look in a completely new direction. So, the path can also go this way. Indestructible heaven scrolls hardness, according to what Small Tower said, it should be the strongest in the world, reflected in the particles that made up the body. This was the strongest in the same tier. However, precisely because the body was made up of countless particles, the particles themselves can't be destroyed, but the makeup could be destroyed. What he needed to do now was to let the particles slide continuously when he received an attack. Similar to Jiaming, taking his punch and stretching his neck for 30 meters to neutralize the power. Jiaming could already control the particles in the body. This was the sign of softness. Neither hardness nor softness could be lacking. Without hardness, you would be flour paste no matter how soft you were and still break under slightly greater application of force. Without softness, no matter how hard the rare metal, it could still be refined, or else how a spirit tool's made. Coupling hardness and softness would be like blood-sucking origin gold, killing people when hard, and wrapping around fingers when soft. He fell into deep thought and looked within himself with the eye of truth, exploring how to control the movement of the particles in his body. The indestructible heaven's scroll had related records, but it was unclear. Before, he'd never understood them, but having been instructed and guided by Small Tower, this section of the scroll finally became logical, constantly enlightening him. He lost track of time and immersed himself in the new realization. Chapter 721, Changes According to Will. Chapter 721, Changes According to Will. Henyi, Henyi. In Linghan's mind, he unceasingly comprehended new concepts, which made him unable to contain his joy. He was definitely an extremely intelligent person. Being able to become the Alchemy Emperor in his past life was a clear proof of this. Furthermore, this was without any predecessor's guidance. Yet, he'd still managed to accomplish such a feat in alchemy. Wasn't that amazing? Now, he had focused his intelligence on unraveling martial arts, and dedicated his entire being to reaching the pinnacle of martial arts. Overwhelming changes were happening within his body, all were to be both strong and flexible at the same time. He had both strength and gentleness. This matter might seem easy in theory, but to actually accomplish it was too difficult. Really too difficult. As everyone was used to their current state, it was difficult to break the habit. Further, to allow the body to stretch like the blood-sucking origin gold and possess such elasticity was a qualitative change. Breaking through your limits and reinventing yourself. Within his dantian, the small being that was Ling Han's spiritual infant was keeping watch, its expression serious as it formed multiple mysterious-looking signs. The indestructible heaven scroll had long since been branded upon it, and now the spiritual infant was currently unraveling a mysterious technique and harmonizing from within. It thereby boosted the change in Ling Han. It wasn't clear how much time had passed when Ling Han stretched out the index finger of his right hand. With his left hand, he grabbed his right index finger and yanked it hard. Previously, if he had pulled with his full strength as what he had done now, he would have definitely stretched out the whole of his right arm. Yet now, a strange thing had happened. His finger actually elongated and thinned, dispersing the force with which he pulled by half. However, once the index finger lengthened up to around 30 centimeters in length, it could no longer be stretched. This was the limit. Ling Han could not help but smile. He had succeeded, he had finally succeeded. Although he was still far from reaching the level of blood-sucking origin gold and changing form, this was still an improvement. This was a great progress. Again. Ling Han did not just stay sitting. He was constantly waving his arms and kicking with his feet. Everything was normal at first, but the distance his striking fists and kicking feet could reach was slowly increasing further and further. It was his body that was stretching. Ling Han's gaze lit up. This wasn't simply just dispersing force. Rather, this could give rise to the formation of a completely different battle tactics. Others might have thought that your fists could only reach so far to be able to shoot out origin power. Yet, in actual fact, the distance at which you could strike was dozens of times the distance. Naturally, it would be difficult for others to defend themselves against this skill. Moreover, if his fists and feet could be stretched endlessly, wouldn't he be able to turn any battle into one fought at close quarters? One had to know that he had cultivated body arts, so his body was comparable to that of precious metal on a level higher than his own, and his brute strength was also quite terrifying. With the addition of these two factors, who could be able to fight on par with him in close quarters? However, Ling Han immediately discovered the limitations. Without the stimulus of external force, he was able to extend his body only up to a limited distance. This was similar to a spring. In theory, it could be pulled longer and longer, but this had to be caused by an external force. When the external force disappeared, it would be restored to its original state unless it was broken. The original state of Ling Han's body was the most stable. Therefore, no matter what changes his body had undergone, it would instinctively try to return to this state. Too bad. Ling Han shook his head internally. If he could control his body to change forms like the blood-sucking origin gold, then he could invent a completely different set of battle tactics, being able to stun anyone with a killing strike. He shouldn't ask for too much. Ling Han smiled. Now, he had become slightly accomplished. He would go and battle that array sword again. Ling Han came out of the Black Tower. Fortunately, the array sword did not recover and try to kill him. Otherwise, he would have been doomed. Come. Let's fight again. He laughed and took the initiative to rush over. Shio. 7 flashes of light shot out from the sword and sliced towards him. Ling Han gave a humph as his body continued to move forward. He did not even use the demon fairy step anymore, allowing the 7 flashes of light to hit him. Now, he was going to use this sword to sharpen the soft side of the indestructible heaven scroll. Pu. In this way, the 7 flashes of light naturally sliced towards him head-on. The clothes on Ling Han's chest were torn open as the sword flashes slashed at him. Ling Han's chest actually stretched back visibly by 3 meters, 6 meters, even 15 meters. And at this time, the power of the 7 sword flashes was finally exhausted. Peng! Ling Han's chest bounced back. His face was slightly pale. Practicing on his own was one thing, but to do it to such an extent on his first real attempt was something that made him feel it was slightly unbearable. 3 bones have been broken and internal organs have also sustained slight injury, he thought. After all, this was an attack from the array sword, which could sever even a deity transformation cultivator in half. Yet, he had taken it head on. How could it be possible that he wouldn't have to pay the slightest price for this? However, what made Ling Han happy was that this time he hadn't been forced to retreat even in the least bit. He had turned his body into countless combinations of particles. The impact of the sword flashes had all been directed to the upper body to be dispersed. Hence, the lower body naturally did not move. It could be done. He had a strong confidence that he would be able to conquer this treasured sword. Again, the indestructible heaven scroll circulated within his body. The body of diamond was claimed to be unbreakable. Even if it had received serious damage, it could automatically heal. It was only just a while, yet his broken bones had already fused back together as if he had never been injured at all. He kept on attacking, but human power was limited, after all. After he had endured too many strikes of sword flashes, he couldn't help but fall back. Otherwise, he would really be cut into 2. The smile playing about the corner of Ling Han's lips was getting wider and wider. His understanding of softness was getting deeper and deeper. There was improvement with every strike sustained, and the injuries which he had to bear were also getting lighter and lighter. He had learnt to use his body's many particles to disperse the force which he had to sustain so much so that he wasn't just pulling it vertically, but also being able to expand horizontally. Before, he had just turned himself into a spring. Now, it was a dough that could not only spread in one, but in every direction. Hence, when his chest was again struck by a sword flash, it was visible that his entire chest was expanding like the surface of water as it was paper, becoming incredibly thin. However, in this way, the attack which he had absorbed was reduced by at least 90%. At this time, the hard side had also exhibited its formidable power. Trying to hurt his body with only 1/10 of the power, his body bounced back and returned to its original state. Ling Han's face was slightly pale. This time, he really wasn't injured. However, the previous state was not his normal form, so it had brought him much strain. The transformation could not be maintained for too long. Otherwise, it would also collapse. Or so he thought, and immediately laughed in spite of himself. If he could stretch up endlessly, then wouldn't he be able to effortlessly absorb the attacks on the level of the shattering void tier? Human power was at times exhaustive. This was in line with the Tao of the world. He shook his head, his eyes fixed on the array sword, and smiled. I shall conquer you within 3 strikes. Xiao, as the thunderclap 9th heaven spread out, he moved to strike once again. Peng, 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 peng. The sword flashes were as bright as if they were ablaze, and slashed towards him madly. Ling Han had no fear. Every part of his body was swelling to absorb the force behind the attack without his retreating even half a step. On the contrary, he had even stretched out his right hand and forcibly extended it for a distance of 1 meter. After absorbing 3 consecutive sword flashes, his hand had finally caught the hilt of the sword. Hong, a terrifying killing intent suddenly struck at Ling Han's consciousness. Chapter 722, Revere Life Sword. Chapter 722, Revere Life Sword. Henyi, Henyi. This sword existed for killing. The sword's blade had been engraved with array patterns, and they were all meant to kill, capable of cutting through the void. Now, the array patterns had transformed into sword intent, and penetrated Ling Han's consciousness. Wang, the spiritual infant, rose up and entered into his consciousness. It sat in the center and guided the sword intent. Wrapped by the indestructible heavenly scroll, it emitted a bright golden light, appearing dignified like the arrival of a great man versed in Tao. The killing intent was suddenly contained, and then began to dissipate like melting snow. The indestructible heaven scroll, the supreme existence. Indeed, the exhibition of only a small portion of it already allowed him to ascend the ranking that contained all the powerful prodigies from the last millennia. Even if this formation sword was incomparably terrifying and could cut through the void, upon coming up against the indestructible heaven scroll, it could do nothing. This was a battle between the different levels of divine sense, and had nothing to do with battle prowess. This was a qualitative confrontation. Would the indestructible heaven scroll be inferior in quality? That had got to be a joke. The killing intent had disintegrated. The formation sword no longer shone. It now looked no different from an ordinary sword. It was done. Ling Han couldn't help but burst out laughing. He had not only conquered a treasured sword, but had also made great progress in his body arts. The rewards this time were huge. He held the formation sword and examined it closely. He was extremely intrigued by the array patterns on the blade. But it was too complicated. He had only looked at it for a short while and felt his head was pounding, making wong, wong, wong sounds. It seemed as if his head was going to explode. He quickly averted his eyes and contemplated for a while, yet he couldn't help but feel shocked. This was because he had taken a good look at it for some time just moments ago, yet he unexpectedly couldn't recall even a single array pattern, as if there was a mysterious force at work that had erased it. Ling Han did not bother about it. He retrieved the sheath. However, in contrast, though the material of the sheath was of top quality, it completely couldn't be compared with the sword. The material of the formation sword was a rare metal of level 10, and the value of the array patterns engraved on the blade was more likely to have exceeded even level 10. The material used on the sheath was only of the 9th tier, which seemed extremely crude in comparison. It made sense, though, since the scabbard was not meant to be used for battle anyway. To use a level 10 rare metal to forge the sheath would be extremely wasteful. Moreover, even if it was made with a metal at level 9, it would already make one feel it had soaring opulence. The number 1 killing sword in the world. Ling Han saw 6 characters written on the sword. Would this be the name of the sword? It's again the number 1 in the world. Isn't this a bit high profile? It doesn't match my character. He threw the sheath into the black tower. This stuff was useless. It would be better to melt it down and forge it into an arrow to better make use of its characteristics. You have such strong killing aura. Henceforth, you shall be called Revere Life Sword. Don't kill lightly. It is natural law that all living beings are to grow, so you can't arbitrarily deprive other creatures of their right to live. Ling Han laughed. He shook the sword gently, and martial intent surged within. Wong, a few array immediately patterns lit up. When he delivered a slash with the sword, 10 sword flashes suddenly appeared. Pu, 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 the walls around him were instantly left with 10 shallow slash marks. It's so powerful. Ling Han was speechless. This stone chamber had withstood the battle between him and the Revere Life Sword without collapsing, which showed just how sturdy it was. However, now that there were already slash marks left behind after a single strike, this also proved the formidable strength of Revere Life Sword. He slashed once more with the sword. This time, sword ray swept out from the sword. Hong, a dent about 30 centimeters deep suddenly appeared on the wall. However, the amazing thing was that the wall actually began trembling, and the slash mark very quickly disappeared. Ling Han was shocked. This tool pavilion actually had self-recovery abilities. Hiss. This tool pavilion was a treasure in itself. Ling Han felt tempted. If he could also keep this tool pavilion, then wouldn't all the things inside be his? Just at this moment, the originally closed door suddenly opened. He had obtained the treasured sword, so there wasn't any reason to stay here. Ling Han stowed the Revere Life Sword into the black tower, side by side with the Demon Birth Sword, both blades held midair in suspension. Yet, Demon Birth Sword actually lowered automatically slightly, not daring to be on the same level with the former, showing the dominance of the Revere Life Sword. Swords had spirits of their own, and would also compare with their peers. Ling Han stepped out of the stone chamber. The stairs were in front of him. He looked around and saw that there were several stone chambers on this floor, but each one had been sealed tightly. He tried to open them, but neither using fists nor a sword could break the doors and allow him to enter. Helpless, He could only take the stairs to go down to the next level. On the next floor, there were again several stone chambers and a flight of stairs. He didn't try to break through the doors, but headed straight down the stairs. Previously, he had been on the 5th floor, so he had to continue going down 4 flights of stairs before he finally returned to the ground floor. He stepped out and saw that there were still many people around, eager to try out the martial stone. Ling Han! Ling Han! Hunyeo jumped over and immediately dived straight into his arms. She hung onto his neck and said, "You've been away for so long. Nyo missed you to death." Ling Han didn't know how long he had been cultivating inside the Black Tower, so he turned around to ask the approaching Zhu Xian'er, "How long have I been inside?" 20 days, Zhu Xian'er informed him. "Oh, so long." Ling Han only felt that he had just blinked his eyes, and it hadn't even been a day. How could it be that 20 days had passed? "Did you guys obtain anything?" he asked with a smile. Yes. Hunyeo immediately jumped out of his arms. Nyo got something fun. She suddenly summoned an enormous pair of scissors that was slightly taller than even herself. It was entirely red in color, and when the scissors were closed together, they resembled a coiled dragon that was covered in scales. The pointed tip was a dragon's head, vivid and lifelike. "Go!" the little brat shouted, and the scissors immediately flew out. They actually transformed into a red dragon, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws while emitting formidable divine might. "Oh, dragon fang shears. Lord Rabbit has seen this before in the notebook left behind by my ancestor," Rabbit said. According to legend, a true dragon died in this realm, and as the dragon's blood spread out, it spawned countless treasured medicine, while the dragon's bones turned into mountains and became what is known now as the Holy Land for the 5 great sects. Furthermore, some of them have become deadly zones of this realm, and hold great danger. The only thing that did not change was the dragon's fang. A long time ago, a great master of martial arts got a hold of this dragon fang and forged it into the dragon fang shears. When stimulated fully, it can possess the power of a real dragon's bite. Everyone was shocked. Such a treasure was actually obtained by Hunyeo. Incredible. This treasure would arouse the interest of even shattering void tier cultivators. Ling Han smiled. He had obtained the Revere Life Sword. Even if it was to come up against Xu Xiuran's ultimate saber, he would have the ability to counterattack. Furthermore, Hunyeo also had the Dragon Fang shears, so the abilities on their side had made great progress. Zhu Xian'er, Wenren Qian, and Yuan Cheng he had also obtained their rewards. However, they had obtained only level 8 spirit tools, which was a far cry in comparison to Ling Han and Hunyeo. Sure enough, the results they achieved on the martial stone directly affected their rewards. With this, Xu Xiuran and Dong Linger, who had concealed their strength, would definitely die of depression. Rabbit had also obtained a treasure, but it adamantly refused to say what it was, which made everyone else curious. Ling Han did not see the Rain Emperor or Mu Rongqing. He asked Zhu Xian'er and got to know that the two had actually been here, but they had already left. Now, they each led a team and became the boss. Their actions for the purpose of the overall plan had to be reconsidered. Ling Han. Jioming appeared, staring at Ling Han, his eyes emitting a bloody light. Chapter 723, Well Done. Chapter 723, Well Done. Henyi. Want to fight? Ling Han asked laughingly. He had now mastered the art of coupling toughness with gentleness where they complemented each other to create an ideal mix. He was completely fearless even if Jioming was a whole cultivation tier above him. It's not a fight, but my executing you. Jioming retorted with a prideful air. So what if the secret techniques mastered by Ling Han were superior to his? In the end, without attaining a certain cultivation level, and without attaining the level of major accomplishment in the secret techniques, he could still totally crush Ling Han. Then let's have a fight. Ling Han naturally was not afraid to fight. Handsome little brother, what are you fighting over? It was at this moment that a sweet and charming voice rang out. The terrifying aura struck unsuspectingly, making everyone feel as if there was a rock pressing down on their chests. It was so difficult to bear that it made one only wanted to spit out blood. The throngs of people couldn't help but part, and there, amidst the crowd, one could see a tall and slender yet well-filled-out figure of a beautiful lady. She sat upright with her legs laid out horizontally atop the body of a huge demonic lion. The demonic lion was so imposing and fiercely powerful that it was alarming. Its entire body was covered in scales, akin to those of a dragon's, and its presence was even more terrifying as if it could shake the stars and constellations off the skies with just a roar. In reality, it could indeed accomplish such a feat as it was an existence of the shattering void tear. The Lunar King had arrived. Who is this? With such overly terrifying presence. My heart is about to explode. Moreover, what an astonishing beauty. Look at that bosom, it is so voluptuous that I definitely would not be able to hold it in with one hand. Wouldn't it be great if I could just have a touch? Pa. Someone had cast lustful looks upon the Lunar King, and unwittingly spoke those lewd thoughts aloud. Immediately, his whole head exploded, leaving the headless body to rock and sway a few times before falling down with a loud crash, thoroughly dead. When the others saw this, they were all overwhelmed with shock, staring at the Lunar King with deep fear. That was because she had stretched out her long, slender, and fair hand, her finger pointed at that person, so evidently she was the one who had killed him. The problem here was not whether that person's strength was strong or not, but rather the majority of the people here all possessed very powerful backgrounds. Making such an unbridled attack, aren't you afraid that it would give cause to disaster? Only a handful of people knew that this particular mistress was in fact at the shattering void tier. There was no need for her to fear anyone in this realm. Furthermore, for him to have dared to have the audacity to utter such lecherous words to an elite of the shattering void tier, shouldn't he be killed? Even if he was a true disciple of the Heaven's Sword sect or the Absolute Saber sect, he would have definitely died in vain. How could the shattering void tier tolerate such humiliation? The Lunar King approached riding on the demonic lion, and even Jioming, who was totally clueless about what it was like to be filled with respect and awe, took a few steps backward, unable to equal the Lunar King's aura. His future achievements were a different story, but at least at present, he totally could not compare with the Lunar King. I won't allow you to have any ideas on who knows Ling Han. Hunyo waved the dragon fang shears as she roared at the Lunar King. The Lunar King could not help being dazed for an instant. You have actually obtained the dragon fang shears? What rarity, wasn't it claimed to be unattainable? Even I was not able to obtain it those years ago. If I had wanted to obtain it, how could it be possible that I would fail? Her beautiful eyes swept across as she remarked, the lot of you have all used the stone of martial intent, I presume? Ha 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 ha, just telling you, I had once left my name inscribed on that stone tablet, the 99th place in all the history of this realm. Ling Han's group were snickering secretly at present. This master's name had actually been already struck off from the list. The sudden emergence of three super geniuses, Ling Han, Hunyo, and Jioming, all at the same time had immediately forced down the Lunar King's name. The Lunar King was still unaware of this, and looking upon the odd expressions on everyone's face, asked, "You don't believe me? Kitten, lead the way, let them have a look at my name." The demonic lion was already made completely submissive, truly as if it was just a kitten. It carried the Lunar King to the front of the stone of martial intent. The Lunar King, apparently filled with pride, pointed her finger at the stone of martial intent and said, "At that time, only I and His Majesty made it onto the list. The other 7 kings all merely managed to trigger red light, and absolutely could not compare with me. Ye, where did my name go?" She stared fixedly at the stone of martial intent. Where was her name on the 99th place? Even in the 100th place, she also did not see it. After such a long time, this piece of lousy stone has malfunctioned, she mumbled. No, it has been forced down by others already. Ling Han opened his mouth. At the very beginning, I did indeed see the Lunar King's name on the 99th place. What? Who would dare to force down my name? The Lunar King became indignant at once, directing her line of vision to the list as she searched upwards. Very quickly, her gaze fell upon Jioming's name. Immediately, she snapped in a murderous manner. Which fellow is named Jioming? Sure, everyone's gazes settled unwaveringly upon Jioming at the same time. It was a conditioned reflex. Words from the mouth of an elite of the shattering void tier would draw out one's subconscious reactions and influence one's will. The expression on the Lunar King's face instantly turned dangerous as she cracked her fingers, making popping sounds. So you're the guy, how dare you force down my name from the list? Tell me, should I chop you into 3 or 5 pieces? The color drained from Jioming's face. No matter how capable he was, to challenge an elite of the shattering void tier was beyond his capabilities. Furthermore, that person had also made it into the list on the stone of martial intent before. And now, she had even attained the battle prowess of the shattering void tier, which was deemed as nearly achieving the ultimate battle prowess that the stone of martial intent predicted. How formidable was that? Even if all the prodigies of the Earth Dragon sect that had been sealed were to appear at the same time, even the strongest among them could not possibly match her. In a flash, the Lunar King's expression turned extremely dark as she questioned, "What you mean is that I am very old already?" "Senior. Senior, your sister." The Lunar King leaped down from the demonic lion's body and charged towards Jioming, beating him up fiercely. With her strength, she naturally overpowered Jioming and thrashed him heavily. Ling Han was laughing inwardly. The Lunar King was exceedingly sensitive about age, and even Ma Duobao, an emperor, was also beaten up. He actually dared to call her senior and even especially emphasized the age gap between the two. He had really run straight into the sharp end of her spear. Jioming felt very wronged, but he could not open his mouth to refute at all. He was beaten by the Lunar King till his nose was bloody and his face was swollen. He felt he has totally become a punching bag, his only fate was to be brutally abused. Only when the Lunar King was feeling somewhat appeased after beating him did he groan earnestly as he covered his face. "Senior, not only I have made it into the list, there's also Ling Han and that little girl." "Senior." The Lunar King's rage, which had calmed down with much difficulty, surged forth once again. Which part of her looked like a senior to him? Hit again. Peng, peng, peng. After a heavy thrashing, the Lunar King smacked her hands and felt her mind and spirit had eased. She looked towards the stone of martial intent, and said, "Which places are the both of you at that you can also surpass me fuck?" She had caught sight of Ling Han's and Hu Nyo's names, and they were ranked at the second and the first place, respectively. Jioming looked on and couldn't stop the corners of his mouth turning into a sneer. He ranked on the 51st place and was already beaten up so badly. Since the two of them ranked first and second, could they still stay alive? "Ha ha ha ha, you actually made His Majesty, that egoistic maniac, drop into the third place?" The Lunar King suddenly burst into hearty laughter after staring dazedly for a while. "I am about to laugh myself to death. That fatty claimed his battle prowess was unparalleled with such extreme pomposity that he even gave himself a title of first. Unexpectedly, he has actually been forced down to the third place already. Wahahaha, I really want to go back and get a look at the expression on that fatty's face now. I will definitely make him lick my shoes. Well done." Chapter 724, A Shocking Glory. Chapter 724, A Shocking Glory. Henyi, Henyi. At this moment, the anguish in Jioming's heart must have magnified to an immeasurable extent. They had all similarly made it into the list, and collectively forced the Lunar King down from it, so why was there such disparity in treatment? He was beaten up, yet Ling Han and Hu Nyo were actually praised with a "well done." "Well done, your sister, it's so unfair." Yet Ling Han was dumbfounded as he remarked, "This first was actually that fatty Ma?" The Lunar King nodded, then added, "Yes, it's precisely that fatty. But, His Majesty was not a fatty before, on the contrary, he was an attractive and charming handsome man. If he had deigned to humbly court me, perhaps my heart would also be stirred." Every fatty had good potential. Ling Han could not imagine how that fatty Ma, whose horizontal width was comparable to his vertical height, had looked like when he was as lean as a lightning bolt. He also did not dare to imagine it, as Fatty Ma's looks were already ingrained into his mind no matter what, he could not relate him to being slim. "You lot sure are impressive, to have actually forced His Majesty down the rankings. Just so you know, that Fatty's combat strength is truly fearsome. Even if we, the 8 kings, fight against him together, we would not be his match." A light glinted in the Lunar King's beautiful eyes. "No wonder His Majesty has such high regard for you lot that even I also feel envious. That Fatty Ma was actually the holder of the first place since the beginning of history. From the current perspective, it was not wrong to say that. That was because he had indeed already attained perfection of the shattering void tier, and it was certain that he had also mastered the secret techniques he knew to the highest degree, far beyond what Ling Han and Hu Niu could compare with. After all, he had spent so many years on cultivating extensively. Ling Han forced himself to stop pondering the fact that Fatty Ma also used to be lean. His heart was filled with great astonishment. The number one since ancient times. What kind of notion was this? Wrong. If Fatty Ma was so strong, then why had he sealed himself in the first place? Given his strength, he could already have split open the skies at that time. It was not like one's strength would advance with this seal. Even if sealed for 1,000,000 years, one's cultivation would still be how it was 1,000,000 years ago. And one would even age somewhat due to the change of time's flow. It was incomprehensible. Ling Han lowered his voice and said, "Lord, what connection do you all actually have with this ancient kingdom? Didn't you know that this ancient kingdom was called Purple Moon Kingdom?" The Lunar King responded laughingly. Ling Han paused, and blurted out, "You've all established this ancient kingdom?" "Of course. At that time, His Majesty led us, the 8 great kings, to unify the whole realm. The so-called 5 great sects were all beaten into a pulp, and we even snatched clean all their amassed resources, leaving them with no means left to seal any elites, breaking off their inheritance with no way to pass it on." The Lunar King guffawed while reminiscing as she continued. "But someone from their upper ranks actually managed to hold out. Then, when we awoke, that previously defeated foe appeared so energetically again. How preposterous." Without inhibition, she did not lower her voice and was clearly heard by the people in the near vicinity immediately. And there was no one that wasn't flustered with shock at hearing it. So it turned out that this empire was so powerful that it once unified and ruled the whole realm. Even the 5 great sects suffered a crushing defeat, and they were making a comeback now. No wonder their strength was horrifying. In just a few short months, they had already taken possession of nearly half of the lands in the Middle State. The Lunar King pondered, then pointed out something. "But during that time when we ruled over the realm, it had only been 3,000 years since the last reckoning, so there were not that many elites of the 5 great sects that had been sealed. Now, it's a different matter. It has been almost 10,000 years, so their elites would have increased at least twofold. Moreover, we still have 4 kings who have yet to awaken, and that is why we are unable to destroy them all in one go." This was already alarming enough. Only 4 kings had awakened, yet they were already so ferocious. If all the 8 kings appeared together, it was indeed possible that they would once again conquer the whole realm. Furthermore, Ma Duobao himself had yet to make a move, and he was a real elite whose battle prowess had emerged superior over multiple generations. Ling Han mulled over it, and asked, "Why did you all seal yourselves for so long?" "The time was not right." The Lunar King shook her head. The natural environment was too poor at the time. Martial arts had yet to achieve the peak, and power of the nation had also not reached the highest degree. As such, she made a gesture that signified splitting open the skies. Although His Majesty's battle prowess has been the strongest in history, but he still could not compete, so we had no choice but to seal ourselves, awaiting an appropriate time to arise. Now was indeed a good time. The martial arts environment was heating up again, and the overall ability level of the realm had reached the strongest level in these 10,000 years, and so, naturally, the stronger would be the power of nation that they could borrow. They would still have to possess strength. If they could not beat them with one shot, then they'd fight again after a nap. "Given what you said, this place is yours?" Ling Han asked. "Of course, why else did you think I chased after that damn alchemy pavilion?" The Lunar King humphed. "That thing which has sprouted legs is an alchemy pavilion?" The corners of Ling Han's mouth twitched momentarily. After all, it was his first time witnessing a building that sprouted legs and flew. It had practically gained a life of its own. That alchemy pavilion was forged from a divine metal. In fact, it is actually equivalent to an alchemy furnace. Furthermore, it has been nurtured endlessly by the precious chi of the earth that His Majesty has gathered. The longer the period of time, the stronger the effect, the Lunar King continued. But it was also because we overslept that divine metal has been nurtured for too long by the precious chi of the earth, which allowed it to gain sentience, and it couldn't even recognize myself or the Flame King. Ling Han probed, then you all still did not succeed? No. The Lunar King was furious. The divine metal has practically gained a life of its own. Taking account of the time, it has been about 2 millennia at the very least. Being nourished by the precious chi of the earth day and night, this damned alchemy pavilion also became considerably impressive. From the looks of it, if His Majesty did not make a move personally, there would likely be no one in this world that could deal with it. Wasn't that putting Ma Duo Bao on too high a pedestal? But upon further thought, he was the number one in battle prowess since ancient times, so there would never be too many compliments and praise that he deserved. Ling Han couldn't help being curious, and asked, what kind of alchemy art was that? He was the alchemy emperor, and naturally was very much interested in anything related to alchemy. Taiji star *******, the Lunar King answered. There was an immediate change in Ling Han's countenance as he said, that is a divine pill. High-level heaven-grade pills were considered divine pills. There were even some shattering void tear cultivators who were still unable to consume them, as their bodies would explode from the sheer strength of the pill. The Taiji star ****** was one of the highest quality alchemical pills among them all. It was capable of increasing the strength of one's divine sense. But exactly how strong, that Ling Han wouldn't know, because he was not at all familiar with the hierarchy of the immortal grades levels. That's right, it was part of our plans to consume it after successful concoction, but, unexpectedly, that damn alchemy pavilion actually dared to ignore me. The Lunar King was practically about to die from fury. Ling Han smilingly said, no need to rush, there's still a long time to go. Even if the 5 great sects were suppressed, opening up the skies was easier said than done. All the people had to submit willingly. If not, power of the nation would merely be akin to poison. Oh, right. Since you've managed to enter the tool pavilion, what kind of precious tool did you get? The Lunar King casually asked. Ling Han took out the Revere Life Sword, and answered, this tool here. The Lunar King inhaled sharply as she responded, the number 1 killing sword has actually fallen into your hands. And yet, the fatty actually claimed that there was no one in this world apart from him who could obtain that sword. You're so lucky, kid. This precious tool was forged by His Majesty's own hands. Also, it is the only one, its mighty ability is unimaginable. Chapter 725, Fighting Jioming Again. Chapter 725, Fighting Jioming Again. Henyi, Henyi. Ling Han couldn't restrain his mirth. Fatty Ma was really not being modest, proclaiming himself as number 1, and even the sword he'd forged was also the number 1 sword in this world. He weighed the sword in his hand and remarked, this sword is not bad. Of course this sword is not bad, it was no ordinary level 10 precious metal that was used to forge it. Instead, it was made with a small portion of divine metal as its foundation, then on top of that, His Majesty added a hefty portion of level 10 precious metal, refined in every way possible, and finally shaped it into a tool, the Lunar King pointed out. Furthermore, His Majesty even engraved on the sword, a short note, if it were not because I don't wield a sword, I would certainly snatch it back. Ling Han asked curiously, then, what kind of array do the array patterns engraved on it form? Haha, I leave it for you to ask that Fatty Ma about it yourself. The Lunar King spread out her hands, not willing to clarify it. Ling Han mused to himself, Fatty Ma ought to be a master of array arts, and with his skill in array arts as support, his battle prowess could suppress the prodigies of all time, and be grandly placed as the first place. Just what kind of heights has he actually achieved on the array arts that he was powerful to such extent? Since the Taiji star ***** could not be recovered, I have also lost interest in this place, the Lunar King continued. I am not in the mood to waste time, as I have to locate the other 4 kings as soon as possible. When the moment comes, the 8 kings will unite. I feel excited just thinking about it. Let's go. She mounted the demonic lion and rode off without a second thought. Such a huge treasure, yet she actually appeared not overly concerned with it. She was truly nonchalant. It also further showed that she had strong enough confidence. She couldn't care less about what others referred to as treasures. "Young man, this is for you." The Lunar King tossed something over. Ling Han caught it and saw that it was a crystal rock. He extended his divine sense inside, and instantly, a three-dimensional map appeared in his mind. Every nook and corner, any place, could be infinitely magnified to display even the most minute of details. Hey, this was a map of this mystery realm. Ling Han recognized it immediately. At the beginning, there was a wide plain, then it was the sea area, followed by plains again, and desert. It was utterly identical to the places he had passed through before. There were also signs marked on the map, which indicated that the region up ahead was the Beast Garden. He already knew that this current region was the Tool region. It had originally been a massive land of flames. But in the wake of the decline of the Purple Moon Kingdom, the flames had burnt up everything, turning the land into a desert. There onwards, it was the Herb Garden, where a lot of spiritual herbs grew, and situated at the rear of the Herb Garden was the Imperial Palace of the Purple Moon Kingdom. Inside it, there was a place called the Lang Ya Library, and there lay hidden a lot of secret techniques that had been gathered by the Purple Moon Kingdom all those years ago. The Lunar King even specifically marked a line of words, Earth Overturning Seal. It was a mystical power. Ling Han couldn't help but be moved. He had already mastered 3 mystical powers, and was profoundly aware of the power that a mystical power held. Naturally, he would not mind learning another mystical power. Although it was said that one should not bite off more than one could chew, there was also a saying that declared an abundance of abilities would not weigh one down. If it was unsuited for him, then he would merely not need to spend too much time and energy to study it. Ling Han withdrew his divine sense and uttered, "We should also go." He wanted to take a look at the herb garden to see how flourishing this herb garden was after at least 2 millennia. "You think you can still leave?" Jiao Ming humphed, his eyes sweeping across with an unfathomable and frosty gaze, not bothering to hide the killing intent in their depth. Ling Han gave out a slight "oh," and said with a laugh, "I have actually forgotten about you. Pardon me, pardon me. To be honest, with your current appearance, I truly could not recognize you." Filthy mouth. Jiao Ming's gaze riveted upon him as he declared, "Do you dare to fight me? TSK, TSK, TSK. A deity transformation tier cultivator is asking me whether I dare to fight him. You have the gall to even mention it." Ling Han laughingly countered. Jiao Ming humphed coldly nevertheless, then responded, "You and I are of somewhat similar age. Your level is inferior to mine because you are too useless, so whom could you blame?" Ling Han let out a snicker. Indeed, a fight of the same age, or perhaps a fight of the same level, could all be considered to be fair. Just that with age such as theirs, such geniuses indeed could not afford a 1 to 2 years gap. For example, Ling Han already had the confidence that he would advance to the deity transformation tier before the age of 20. By the time he was at Jiao Ming's age, who knew, maybe he would already be in the heaven tier. Absolute fairness did not exist in this world. "It appears that you would not give up if I do not fight you, then let's fight." Ling Han entered the bleak and boundless desert, turned around, and directed his gaze at Jiao Ming. The latter had left the Tool Pavilion much earlier on, and had been lying in wait for him all this while. Naturally, this was conveying a kind of determination. "I would not give up until I crushed him." Jiao Ming sneered as he took out 2 curved blades that were shaped like the crescent moon. The blades were very short, and as he held them in his hands, it looked like his fists had grown pointed horns. While they did not hinder his punches, they also rendered destructive power. Was this the spirit tool he had gotten from the Tool Pavilion? He similarly was ranked on the ranking, though not as astounding as Ling Han and Hu Niu, but the treasure he got was certainly also not ordinary. Ling Han did not wield the Revere Life Sword, for he wanted to test out the strength of his defense skills after he had cultivated the art of coupling toughness and softness against the battle prowess that was near to the limits of the deity transformation tier to see what kind of manifestation it would bring about. "Merely a spiritual infant tier cultivator, and you dare to challenge me." Jiao Ming charged forth in large strides, striking out with a fist. His martial intent was shining brightly, leaving behind a band of light behind his fist. Ling Han drew up both his fists, rapped with his origin power, and launched himself into an exchange of blows with his opponent. Both have cultivated body arts, and naturally were also more inclined to fight at close range. In terms of body arts, Jiaming was considered to be quite accomplished, and his physique's endurance was as tough as precious metal of the same level. Furthermore, his level was in fact originally higher than Ling Han's by a whole cultivation tier. Therefore, with regards to the level of physique strength, both parties were similar. But what about the soft aspect? Amid the exchange of punches, their arms have transformed into wave-like lines, which were unceasingly surging. If these were to graze the body of any ordinary person, the strong vibration would have definitely shattered their bones. However, these two still remained in fine condition, making use of such wave motions to continuously disperse the power behind every blow they were struck with. Chem. Jiaming was surprised that Ling Han had also grasped the art of coupling strength with gentleness. Previously, when they had been exchanging blows, Ling Han had merely displayed the aspect of strength. His physique had upped another level, and in addition to the art of coupling strength with gentleness, he was confident he could suppress Ling Han. What he did not anticipate was that Ling Han's level had also elevated, and had grasped the soft aspect, making both parties' defense level revert back to being of the same level once again. Since the defense was of fairly equal standing, the deciding factor would be the strength of their attacks. Jiaming grinned, then gave off a laugh, revealing a ruthless demeanor as the weapon in his hands suddenly emitted a coldness akin to that of ice and frost, bringing with it terrifying energy that slashed straight towards Ling Han. Ling Han firmly withstood this strike, but suddenly there was a spurt of blood, and a scar was left behind on his elbow. He couldn't help glancing at that weapon and noted that it should be a spirit tool of an extremely high grade. Although Jiaming was unable to display its full strength, it had still dealt damage to his physique. After all, his opponent's strength was of a much higher level than his, and with the activation of his spirit tool, he was naturally inflicted with an injury. However, the power of the indestructible Heaven Scroll was not merely reflected by the sturdy aspect of the physique, but also its ability to recover. Clearly visible to the naked eye, Ling Han's injury disappeared in the blink of an eye. If it weren't for the fact that Jiaming had stared fixedly at his wound all the while, perhaps he would not have even realized he had injured Ling Han earlier on. Such ability to recover could only cause Jiaming's expression to change drastically. Chapter 726, Bloodline of the Earth Dragon. Chapter 726, Bloodline of the Earth Dragon. Henyi, Henyi. A smile broke out on Ling Han's face as he gloated. So it appears that this time, there would only be grievance for you. He inadvertently revealed killing intent in his gaze being provoked by Jiaming time and again. He'd lost his patience. So long as he was able to kill him, he absolutely would not be merciful. Jiaming humphed, knowing that merely depending on the difference in cultivation tiers would not be enough to suppress and crush Ling Han. He gave out a low howl, and a weird sound escaped from his throat, while blue veins were throbbing throughout his body. It was as if there was some kind of terrifying thing trying to break out from within his body. Ling Han dared not underestimate the battle prowess of his opponent, as he had gained the approval of the Stone of Martial Intent, prevailing over thousands of prodigies through the ages to rank 51st. Although this was not the peak of Jiaming's current battle prowess, still, he could not be careless. Underestimating whichever of the prodigies could very likely plant the roots of destruction for oneself. 4 styles of Devil Serpent. Jiaming bellowed, aiming at Ling Han as he went straight for the kill. A fist struck out directly to attack Ling Han's lower abdomen. Ling Han raised his hand to block it, and bang, he struck his palm down on his opponent's wrist, but the latter seemed to have turned into Doug. It actually took a turn and wound around to strike again at Ling Han's chest as the sharp blade in his hand shone with a cold light. Ling Han was astonished. Could it be that this guy's bones were actually soft? How could he change the form of his arm in such a way? This was not merely just grasping the soft aspect, but was instead some kind of secret technique. It was as if he was a serpent, yes, precisely like the bones of a serpent. Ling Han's body bent backward abruptly, dodging the swing of the curved blade. Such movements were practically impossible for an ordinary cultivator to execute. Only by cultivating the body could the body then display such swift reactions. Moreover, Ling Han looked even more like he had been chopped in half by a knife. The extent of the bend in the upper half of his body was so much that it was inconceivable. Jiao Ming once again swung his fist over. This time, his arm actually transformed into a big serpent, with its head moving towards Ling Han while opening up its mouth to bite. The black-colored snake's head was quite lifelike, its poisonous fangs clearly visible. This strike was really too fast. It was so fast that Ling Han could not evade it in time. Pop! This punch immediately pierced through Ling Han. Jiao Ming frowned, for he had not managed to hit Ling Han with this strike. Ling Han had transformed into a lightning bolt, and had, in a flash, fled 3 meters away. He transformed back into himself again and laughingly remarked, "Almost hit me. Not bad, this move is not bad, one move covering another, really does show some skill." He had already cultivated the thunderclap 9th heaven to the point of minor accomplishment, so his speed was of course rapid. How could it merely be some skill? It is more than enough to kill you. Jiao Ming increased his battle prowess and charged towards Ling Han. He really was overbearing, this genius of Earth Dragon sect. Leaving his name on the stone of martial intent, he himself was a whole cultivation tier higher than Ling Han, holding the upper hand whether it was in the aspect of physical strength or battle prowess. If not for Ling Han having a great recovery ability, in addition to the thunderclap 9th heaven allowing him to evade and dodge out of harm's way, he would have been hit badly and dealt severe injuries by his opponent for sure. Even so, Ling Han also became more and more passive. He could only return 1 to 2 moves for every 10 moves his opponent made. "Today is the day that you die," Jiao Ming cried out. He wanted to kill Ling Han in a single blow. "Your words sound nicer than any song," Ling Han remarked calmly. He was only testing the kind of defense level his own physique could currently reach. Accordingly, his battle prowess at the moment did not reflect its full capacity. These words, I will engrave them on your tombstone to let everyone know that there was such an arrogant idiot who was too stubborn to admit defeat even at death's door. Jiao Ming guffawed, the light reflecting off his curved blade. Chill ***. This was very fearsome, for it could pose an enormous threat to Ling Han's defense. After all, it was a high-level spirit tool, and with Jiao Ming's more powerful physical strength, he could even rip through level 8 precious metal. Ling Han was no longer being passive and getting thrashed. He drew out the Revere Life Sword, then raised and brought it level, pointing at Jiao Ming, and retaliated. "Take a look at my sword that will slay you." Jiao Ming looked at this sword, and his expression couldn't help but change as he unwittingly blurted out, "Array patterns." It was obviously a sword, yet it was unexpectedly covered with array patterns. Strange, too strange. It was way beyond his imagination. To be able to die by this sword, you can die with no regret. Ling Han held the sword and struck out in a move to kill. Earlier, without the sword in hand, he could not fully display the might of Sword Ray, but now it was different. The Revere Life Sword itself contained some divine metal. Additionally, there was the fierce energy formed by the array patterns. Thus, the destructive power of Sword Ray delivered by this sword would naturally be even higher. Sure, Sword Ray swept out, seemingly able to destroy the heavens and wipe out the lands, extremely horrifying in its appearance. I am in the deity transformation tier. Do you think I will fear you? Jiao Ming humphed icily, swinging out his fist, transforming Ray into chi that formed huge black serpents that pounced towards Ling Han to bite him. Pop, pop, pop. The array patterns on the Revere Life Sword shone. There were merely 7 lights, but even so, it was still incredibly terrifying, mincing those big serpents into shreds. Jiao Ming's expression turned ghastly pale. He knew that this sword was very impressive, but had not expected that it could reach such an extent. The destructive power could only be described as horrifying. How could there be such a precious tool? It was not as simple as Ling Han wielding an exceptionally outstanding tool. He had also activated an array that was a killing array with no compare, so how was one supposed to break it? Jiao Ming cried out, eventually unleashing his ultimate great move. The empty shadow of the big serpent behind him disappeared, and became a genuine earth dragon. This kind of move made him terribly agonized. Bluish-green blood vessels were all over his face, and it looked like they were going to burst. After he howled loudly, the empty shadow of the earth dragon behind him finally stabilized, giving off a primal aura of an ancient era. At the beginning of the world, an earth dragon one came through the crack between the heaven and the earth. It was ancient and mysterious. The earth dragon held its head high, it did not have facial features, only a mouth, and its whole body was a dull red in color. Its limbs could be clearly seen as if it was still capable of dripping with sticky body fluids, giving one an incredible feeling of disgust. Die. As soon as Jiaming pointed at Ling Han, that earth dragon immediately pounced over in Ling Han's direction. The speed was very fast. It was not a physical existence, and could not be judged with common sense. In an instant, it had appeared in front of Ling Han, and ferociously bit down. Yet, because it was not a realistic entity, it was naturally also impossible for it to cause any substantial injury. The whole body looked just like a shadow gliding across. Jiaming actually bellowed out a hearty laugh as he shouted, "Ling Han, you are already a dead man." His complexion was slightly pallid, nevertheless, he was wearing a carefree smile. This was actually his real trump card, which involved the power of his bloodline. Because his ancestral blood was not extremely thick, using such a great move was very straining on him, and there would even be a certain amount of backlash to face later. But that was all right, for although this earth dragon was an empty shadow and could not possibly do any harm to a realistic entity, the fact was it was specifically aimed to harm the soul. Ling Han's soul should have been swallowed even if not entirely gone, there would merely be traces left behind. How much actual strength would he still have left to fight with? He took off with a blood-curdling cry in Ling Han's direction, aiming to finish him off. This time, he wanted to thoroughly kill Ling Han. Under the burst of brute force, he was like a raging arrow charging forth, materializing in front of Ling Han in a flash. The curved blade in his hand slashed forth towards Ling Han's neck. The strength of his physique was cultivated with his cultivation technique, but he needed to consciously control his soft aspect. Was Ling Han still capable of that with the state he was in now? Die. A sneer hung at the corners of Jiaming's lips. Finally, he could eliminate this great threat to himself. Chapter 727 Interference. Chapter 727 Interference. Henyi, Henyi. A fist struck out. The array patterns on the curved blade shone, emitting a thick chill in the air. A ruthless smile appeared at the corners of Jiaming's mouth, for with this one blow, this opponent who had the strongest battle prowess of all ages was going to be something of the past entirely. This gave him absolute joy. Zhu Xian'er and the others in her group cried out in alarm what was wrong with Ling Han. Xiao, it was at this moment that Ling Han's figure suddenly bent and miraculously dodged this fatal blow. How was that possible? The smile on Jiaming's face immediately froze, but without waiting for him to recover from his shock, a fearful coldness whirled across, slashing at his chest. He had not expected Ling Han to still be able to react at all. Moreover, he had just pulled off a great move a moment ago, so his condition had already fallen to an all-time low. It was basically impossible to evade this sword. Pu. At once, the sword hit the middle of his chest squarely, and his whole body was sent flying by the slash as a fountain of blood spurted from his chest. How is it possible that your soul is still intact? Jiaming covered his chest. This incomprehension was beyond the injuries he had suffered. He would die with regrets if he did not get a clear understanding of the situation. Ling Han smiled slightly, and remarked, "Why should I tell you?" Previously, during the time when the Earth Dragon had sprung a surprise attack on him, he indeed had been affected. But with a slight tremor of the Black Tower, that discomfort had been dispersed, he simply remained unperturbed and laid out a trap for his opponent. Jiaming was so indignant he wanted to kill something that was his ultimate move, and it was precisely with this move that he could dash up to the 51st place on the stone of martial intent. That it was actually ineffective on Ling Han, this was driving him nuts. Could it be that this was the difference between the first and the 51st place? He suddenly threw up blood. Firstly, it was because of the surging rage in his heart, while secondly, the injury he had sustained on his chest was really too severe. The killing aura has transformed into countless small swords, roving and shifting within his body, making him feel such agony that he wanted to die. There were even tears of blood flowing out from his eyes. He burned with hatred, Had it not been for his being overconfident in his own ultimate move, he absolutely would not have been so easily harmed by Ling Han. In terms of real strength, he was in no way weaker than Ling Han after all. He was also an ultimate genius, and furthermore, he had the advantage of being a whole cultivation tier higher. Now, being totally defeated in the eye of the public, moreover defeated by one of an inferior cultivation level, how could he bear such humiliation? Ling Han shook his sword, and once again charged forth to kill her, wanted to thoroughly eliminate this man. Jioming hurriedly retreated as he did not want to die by Ling Han's hands. As long as his injuries recovered, there was still a chance for him to stage a comeback. He was definitely not weaker than Ling Han, but he had suffered a physical injury, and merely moving made his wound spurt out blood madly, which almost caused him to stumble and fall. His complexion also became ashen. Ling Han had arrived, unleashing a strike aimed at Jioming's neck, wanting to end this fight in a clear-cut and orderly manner. Jioming's hatred burst forth into flames of fury in his eyes. He had been so conceited that there was not any kind of life-saving precious treasure on him. On the one hand, he'd thought that there was none in this world that could or dared to kill him, and on the other, he'd believed that he would become dependent on such a treasure should it come into his possession, and would be held back from realizing his full potential. But now, he felt extreme regret. He didn't want to die, he wanted to live. Only if he stayed alive could he take revenge, and only by being alive could he surpass Ling Han. The sword slashed down. A withered and lean hand suddenly stretched out, 2 fingers pressed together firmly clamping the cutting blade of the sword in between, not letting the sword slash down even a tiny bit. An old man in a black-colored robe suddenly appeared. He was of great height and sturdy build, and as if he contained a volcano within his body, it looked like he could erupt at any time to burn the skies and wipe out the lands. He looked towards Ling Han and was all smiles as he said, "Young man, striking so ruthlessly, surely your heart must harbor sinister and vicious intention." Ling Han lifted the blade of the sword. That old man also did not dare to go against such a killing sword forcefully. He withdrew his hand and retreated backward, while at the same time lifting Jioming up with a single move. "Respected Master Tong." Jioming revealed an expression of pleasant surprise. This was really an unexpected rescue from danger. Even for one with his disposition, he could not help but forget himself. This old man's surname was Tong, and the given name was Yang Wen. He was an elite of the Earth Dragon sect, and his cultivation level was in the heaven tier. Tong Yang Wen smiled and actually said respectfully, "Hereafter, you must always remember to put on the treasured talisman that the sect leader has bestowed upon you. Don't be presumptuous anymore, an act of carelessness could cause your downfall." "Yes." Jioming hastily nodded. His life was just saved by him, so no matter how wild Jioming was, he would also not dare to act arrogant at such a time. Tong Yang Wen directed his line of vision towards Ling Han as his expression immediately became dark. To lash out without the least hesitation at a fellow disciple of the same academy, the moral character and disposition of yours really cause one's teeth to tremble. However, the academy's core values are precisely to cure sickness and save lives. I shall then first cure you of your haughtiness, and let you have a little taste of what hardship is like. He struck out, an origin power gathered and transformed into a huge black hand, which was akin to have blotted out the sky and covered the earth, batting downwards over in Ling Han's direction. It was really sickening. He obviously wanted to settle a personal score, yet actually uttered such pretentious word. Ling Han's body transformed into a lightning bolt and retreated backward in the nick of time as he said with indifference, "Old fool, do you still want face? This was originally a duel, and since we have already agreed to fight, one should be responsible for one's life and death. Before this, during the time when I ran into danger, why did I not see you jump out and come running to my aid? Want to be *********? Then don't think of setting up some kind of plaque to proclaim how chaste you are. It's so sickening." Tong Yang Wen was so enraged that his body was trembling. This puny spiritual infant tier cultivator actually went so far to treat him with such insolence. He was at the peak of the heaven tier, and was only a step away from breaking through to the shattering void tier. No matter where he went, he should receive merely worship and reverence. But now, to actually be condemned by a torrent of verbal abuse in his face, This made him so overwhelmed with ire and wrath that he was almost driven mad. "Lad, you actually dare hurl insults at me," he reprimanded, his eyes burning with killing intent. He did not kill Ling Han, because he treasured ability. As a slave, Ling Han was not too bad, and he could someday deliver him to the immortal realm. Then, after being brainwashed, he would be turned into a qualified lackey. Yet, Ling Han actually dared to curse him so mercilessly, so his killing intent was naturally incited. He was but a slave, so what if he died? So be it. It did not matter how excellent natural talent was. He could just use 10 other lackeys to compensate for the gap left behind, all right? Ling Han smiled faintly and responded, "Dirty old swine, why could you not be cursed at? I am a heaven-grade alchemist, and my position is of the same rank as yours, so you tell me why I could not curse you." Tong Yang Wen gave a scornful laugh. If it were a few hundred years ago, then indeed he would not want to offend a heaven-grade alchemist, for that would jeopardize the relationship with the Alchemist Association and affect the martial arts of the whole realm. But now, concoction of the realm pill was near at hand, and now that there was no use left for them, what was the use of an alchemist? At most, they needed only bring a few gifted talents of above-average standard into the immortal realm, then train and develop them. Nevertheless, they would still become lackeys. Just a lowly servant, what right did he have to behave so arrogantly? Then you are really courting your own demise. Tong Yang Wen's killing aura was ablaze. Injuring fellow disciples and cursing at your seniors, such dishonorable conduct has to be punished. I, on behalf of the Restore Heaven Academy, shall mete out the punishment. To pull the weight of your seniority, there is no lack of words to do so. Old dog, you have let me behold shamelessness at an all-new high. I am deeply impressed. Ling Han mocked with a short laugh. Damn you. Tong Yang Wen eventually could not hold it in anymore, and once again a palm struck forth. This time, his killing intent had been stirred, and the big hand that he swung out in a patting movement was much more fearsome than before. One by one, the patterns lit up, and the imposing aura of the heaven tier pressed down heavily. Just the air alone was enough to send an ordinary spiritual infant tier cultivator collapsing into pieces. Ling Han's figure hastily dodged and arrived by Zhu Xian'er's side, where he then stretched out his arms and lifted her into his arms as he simultaneously called out, "Hunyo, rabbit, let's go." Fighting head-on against a heaven-tier elite? Only an idiot would do such a thing. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.